What? Hank lost? And he lost to Urian and Krasu's disciple. In a conference chamber in the Magus Tower, Brent abruptly rose to his feet with an incredulous expression as he stared at Richard, who was holding a letter in his hands. The Magus Tower elders in the conference chamber were also astonished. Everyone could accept George being defeated. After all, he was only a 12-year-old elementary magic caster with insufficient combat experience. However, Hank was Brent's most prized disciple, and was a 4th-tier magic caster at just 16 years of age. He was an exceptional prodigy even in the Magus Tower. With him leading the team, they had thought that the Magus Tower would crush the rest of the competition, but who would have thought that he would be defeated by Krasu and Urian's disciple? The little half-elf girl was only 4.5 years old, and had only been learning magic for a month. How supremely talented would she have to be to defeat Hank after studying magic for such a short time? Richard also wore a strained expression as he burned the letter with a ball of green flames. He looked at Brent, and continued, "Not only did Hank lose to that little girl, he even used the forbidden spell you gave him against her in a sneak attack." What? All of the elders instantly erupted into a frenzied commotion. Unleashing sneak attacks during a duel was an extremely disgraceful tactic. Doing so against a little 4-year-old girl was even more horrendous. He had brought shame on the Magus Tower. So, did she die? Brent looked at Richard with an expectant gaze. "Do you think a little 4th-tier brat can successfully kill someone in front of Krasu and Novan?" Richard looked at Brent with a sneer on his face as he said, "Also, that idiot's attack was dispelled by that little girl herself. How is that possible? The forbidden spell I gave him possessed the power of a 7th-tier spell. How could she possibly have blocked it?" Brent's eyes widened in shock. All of the elders were also quite stunned to hear that. With 2 10th-tier great magic casters present along with Novan, the number 1 spatial magic caster on the entire continent, it was an absolute joke for a 4th-tier magic caster to try and unleash a sneak attack. However, what was most surprising to everyone was that the little girl had managed to defend herself. Richard's brows furrowed as he spoke. Urian put the oracle stone on her staff. The fireball magic that she unleashed was most likely enhanced by more than 10 times in power, so she completely crushed Hank with her own power. That idiot! I'm going to teach him a good lesson when he gets back. Brent felt utterly humiliated. Not only had Hank tried to sneak attack a little 4-year-old girl, he had even failed. Krasu has already destroyed his mind realm, and Hank left the Magus Tower team after they departed from Chaos City. You won't see him ever again. Richard shook his head with a wistful expression. With Hank's talent, he would have at least been able to become an 8th-tier magic caster in the future. How could Krasu be so cruel? Great Elder, you have to uphold justice for me. Hank is my most prized disciple, but his future has been ruined by Krasu. Brent put on a grief-stricken expression as he looked at Richard. All of the elders fell silent upon hearing that. Your disciple sneak attacked a little 4-year-old girl, and he used a forbidden spell, so he was clearly trying to kill her. Even then, he was still defeated. Trash like him deserves to pay the price for his actions. He has brought shame on the Magus Tower. A tall and thin man in the conference chamber sneered as he said, "What's funny to me is that you're trying to paint your disciple as the victim here. I'm only surprised that Krasu only destroyed his brain realm. If it had been 30 years ago, Krasu would have killed him without even batting an eyelid. Hank's actions are an utter disgrace. I also approve of the punishment handed down by Krasu." Another elder nodded in agreement. If this kind of trend were allowed to spread in the Magus Tower, then no one would try to work hard to improve. Everyone would be trying to get their hands on sealed forbidden spells to toss them at their enemies. Yet another elder chuckled coldly. Brent's face was flushed with humiliation. He wanted to retort, but he refrained from doing so. Instead, he turned to Richard to await his verdict. "Banish Hank from the Magus Tower and tell what he did to all of our Magus Tower's disciples. His actions should serve as a warning to everyone. I'll write an apology letter to Krasa personally. Richard turned to Brent with a grave expression, and continued, also, Krasa had something to say to you. Go to Chaos City and apologize to him in person within 10 days, or he's going to come to Rodu and destroy our Magus Tower. This, Brent was completely dumbfounded upon hearing that. All of the elders also burst into a commotion. Some of them were enraged, while others were concerned. Krasa wasn't joking when he talked about destroying the Magus Tower. After all, he had done so on more than one occasion previously. Great Elder, this, Brent turned to Richard with a panicked, beseeching expression. You take care of this matter yourself. Richard had no intention of cleaning up Brent's mess for him. Great Elder. Right at that moment, an urgent voice sounded from outside the conference chamber. Richard's brows furrowed slightly as he made his way toward the entrance. The door slowly opened, revealing a middle-aged magic caster who handed a letter to Richard as he said in a low voice, Great Elder, this is an urgent letter from the Wind Forest. Richard took the letter and burned the envelope to ashes, leaving only a piece of paper in his hand. His eyes scanned the contents of the letter, and his brows furrowed. After a while, he turned around, and said, The meeting is adjourned for the day. Elliot, Brent, you stay behind. Everyone else may go. A hint of hope returned to Brent's eyes upon hearing that. The elders left the conference chamber one after another, leaving only 8 people behind. Richard waved a hand, and the soundproof magic spell formation in the conference chamber was activated, creating a golden barrier. Great Elder, what would you like to tell us? Elliot asked. Everyone else was also looking at Richard with curious expressions, wondering if Richard was going to address the threat made by Krasa. Brent opened his mouth, but suppressed the urge to say anything in the end. He merely looked at Richard with a hopeful expression. He didn't want to have to face Krasa by himself. I've just received news from the Wind Forest. Schubert's dead, Irina killed him, Richard announced with a grave expression. The letter fluttered down from his hand for everyone to see. A deathly silence descended over the entire conference chamber, and dark expressions appeared on everyone's faces as they looked at the letter. There was no name on the letter, but no one doubted its authenticity. No one knew just how closely connected the Elven race was with the Magus Tower. Schubert held such a high position in the Elven race, how could Irina kill him just like that? She's insane. Brent gulped nervously with an incredulous expression on his face. Elliot and the others also looked at Richard in silence. They had all participated in that ambush 3 years ago, contributing to the downfall of Mag Alex. Schubert was one of the magic casters sent to assist them by the Elven race. Now that he had been killed by Irina, everyone was feeling rather concerned. Just how powerful was Irina? It was said that in the younger generation, Irina was the closest in power to Mag Alex. As people who had faced the terrifying might of Mag Alex in person 3 years ago, everyone present had a good idea of just how powerful she was. If she was beginning to take revenge for Mag Alex and her little daughter, then what was going to become of them? Schubert's death was perhaps just the beginning. Irina has always been volatile and unpredictable. It's not strange for her to kill Schubert if she discovered his involvement in that incident 3 years ago. Richard looked at everyone with a grim expression, and said, This might just be the beginning. The royal family might have kept the incident confidential, and all of the evidence has been eradicated, so we don't know how much information is in her grasp. The elf that was here a while ago might have taken back more information than we anticipated. What should we do, then? If she learns that we participated in the assassination 3 years ago, will she seek revenge on us? Brent was feeling quite anxious. The threat of Krasa was still hanging over his head, and he was now having to potentially deal with Irina's revenge. He felt as if he were about to have a mental breakdown. We are the only ones with knowledge of that incident. All of the demons involved have been killed, and the second prince definitely won't disclose any information. Even if she knows that our Magus Tower was involved, surely she wouldn't make us her enemy. Even the royal family won't allow her to kill magic casters of our Magus Tower with no evidence nor reason. She won't dare to do anything to us unless she wants to provoke a full-blown war between the Roth Empire and the Elven race. Besides, as powerful as Mag Alex was, we still managed to bring him down. If she goes too far, we can just do the same with her as well. Elliot was full of confidence. Brent's breathing accelerated as he said, "Yes. We'll kill her if she dares to come after us. She and Alex gave birth to that filthy half-breed child, and we've been covering that up for her this entire time. If we tell the entire Elven race about this, no one will support their princess anymore. If her status as the princess is revoked, she'll just be an ordinary elf no matter what she does. We can kill her without worrying about anything then." The other elders' eyes also lit up upon hearing that. After killing Alex 3 years ago, Irina's revenge was always the main cause for concern for them. If they could kill her as well, then all of the issues would be resolved. Also, hasn't Kraso already completely detached himself from the Magus Tower? If he tries to destroy the Magus Tower, we can just kill him as well. He'll just be an intruder, so we have a reason to kill him. Brent's expression was already becoming twisted with a hint of insanity. Well, all of the elders became hesitant upon hearing that, and all of them turned to Richard. "Idiot! I can tell why Hank turned out the way he did now." Richard glared at Brent with a cold expression as he scoffed, "If you dare to spread word of Irina having a child with a human, the entire continent will know that our Magus Tower joined forces with the demons to kill Alex. Do you plan to commit suicide then, or face the wrath of the Imperial Army? The elves dared to let us know about Irina birthing a child with a human because they knew that we can't reveal that secret no matter what. Do you plan on fighting the entire elven race as well?" Brent's expression changed as he hung his head. As for Krasu, even though he's left the Magus Tower, if he really does come to destroy our Magus Tower, do you think everyone will join you in your efforts to kill him? Richard's voice grew even colder as he said, "Let me tell you this, at least half of our members will kill you first as they were all unofficial disciples of Krasu. If you dare to attack Krasu, that old monster in the royal palace will definitely come after you. Those two are the only ones left among the founders of the Magus Tower." Brent's face paled further and further as he listened to Richard's criticism. In particular, upon hearing mention of the old monster in the royal palace, his legs began to tremble, and he lowered his head even further. Elliot also lowered his head in silence. "What should we do then, Great Elder? We can't just sit around and wait for these threats to eventuate." A short and stubby elder wore a concerned expression. "Don't be too concerned. Irina has been locked away in detention for a year, and there's no way she has a list of everyone involved in the assassination 3 years ago, so she won't come after us anytime soon. Besides, our Magus Tower is not an organization that anyone can just push around. If she really dares to come after us, then let her come. This is our territory, what do we have to fear?" Richard burned the letter into ashes as he said coldly, "I'll deploy some people to keep an eye on Irina. From now on, we'll cut off her connection with the outside world. As long as she can't find any concrete evidence, she won't come to Rodu. At the same time, we'll exert pressure on the elven race so they can control her. I'm sure they wouldn't want to face us in battle, either." "Great Elder, Brent wanted to say something. "If I were you, I'd think about how I can get to Chaos City as quickly as possible." Richard turned to him with a cold expression. "Yes." Brent could only lower his head with a fearful expression. "Bastard! That elf discovered way more than I thought he had. I shouldn't have let him go back alive." In the second prince's manner, Josh wore an expression twisted with fury as he looked at the green letter in his hand. Countless sheets of white paper fluttered around him as if to accentuate his rage. The green letter was reduced to a ball of green fire, and the gusts of wind around Josh subsided as did the twisted expression on his face. He adopted his normal warm demeanor as he plucked one of the white sheets of paper out of mid-air. All of the other sheets of paper suddenly thudded to the ground as if they had increased exponentially in weight. Schubert's dead, so Irina must know some things already. She must be suspecting me already, and that would land a vital blow on our relationship. I have to find Alex and that little brat before her, and kill them to kill off any hope in her heart. When that time comes. Irina, I'm going to make you willingly marry me. Josh stood in front of his desk and began to write a letter. Dear Irina, after half an hour, Josh waved his hand through the air to dry the ink on the sheet of paper on the desk. He then carefully read through the letter to ensure that the wording and expression were perfect before tucking it into an envelope. If you want to find out information about them, then I'll tell you that they're still alive. In that case, you won't be so eager to exact your revenge. Come to think of it, I really regret not doing a thorough job back then. Josh sealed the envelope with a cold expression on his face. He snapped his fingers, and the door to his study opened as his butler walked in with a bamboo tube in his hands. Is that news from Seuss? Josh looked at the bamboo tube in the butler's hands with a hint of surprise on his face. Yes, Your Highness. This letter has just arrived, the butler replied respectfully. Let me see it. Josh took the bamboo tube with a calm expression. At the same time, he handed the envelope in his hand over to the butler, and said, Send this letter to the princess in the Wind Forest as quickly as possible. Yes. The butler accepted the letter with both hands before quickly exiting the study. Josh opened the bamboo tube and extricated the letter within. He looked at it for a while before murmuring to himself, Seuss has already been in Chaos City for over 10 days, but he hasn't found anything related to Alex. Could it be that my judgment was incorrect? Maybe they're not in Chaos City, but hiding in a secluded location instead. Josh fell into deep thought before writing 2 more letters. One of them was placed in a bamboo tube, while the other was tucked into an envelope. He opened the door, only to find that the butler was still standing respectfully beside the entrance. Send this letter to Seuss, and this one to Helena. Josh handed over the 2 letters to the butler as he said, also, next time an elf from the Wind Forest appears in Rodu, make sure to keep a good eye on them. As soon as they exhibit any abnormal behavior, capture them at once and put them through strict interrogation. I'd rather kill innocents than let any spies get away. Yes. The butler nodded respectfully before rushing away again. Alex, you're just as mysterious as ever. I'm not going to let you get away this time, though, Josh murmured to himself. Mistress, are we just going to ignore the fact that Irina killed Master Schubert? Her Majesty is far too lenient with her, and only locked her in detention for a year. That's surely going to be a dissatisfactory verdict for the other major families. In a cave with a ceiling akin to a starry night sky, Hetty was appraising Helena with an indignant expression. What do you propose, then? Helena asked. I think we should join forces with all of the major families to exert pressure on Her Majesty. We have to make her revoke Irina's status as the Elven Princess and cut off her connection with the Tree of Life, then banish her from the Wind Forest, Hetty suggested through gritted teeth. Banish her from the Wind Forest. Helena looked at Hetty with a mocking expression as she said, Are you not aware that Irina's power is second only to Her Majesty in the Elven race? Even I may not be able to defeat her when she draws upon the power of the Tree of Life. Her Majesty will inevitably return to the Sea of Stars. When that time comes, Princess Irina will be the most powerful guardian of our race, yet you want to banish her. But, she's completely uncouth and untamable. If we support someone else to become the princess, they'll become Her Majesty's heir. When Her Majesty returns to the Sea of Stars, the entire elven race would be under your control. Hetty looked at Helena with an urgent expression. Why would I want to control the elven race? I want our elven race to become more powerful. I want to completely wash away the humiliation we suffered during the war among species, and make the entire continent tremble in fear in the face of our elven army. Helena looked at Hetty with a cold expression as she said, You can die, but Irina can't. We can't allow her reputation to be tarnished, either, as she has to be the main guardian of our elven race. Also, how do you know that Her Majesty will return to the Sea of Stars before I do? I watched Her Majesty grow up, so I should be the one to return to the Sea of Stars before her. Helena's expression grew calmer, but her eyes glowed with a fervent light as she said, "Power is pointless to me. All I want is to see the elven race stand at the pinnacle of the Norland continent, that is my final wish. To achieve that objective, I'm willing to do anything." The stars in the night sky overhead suddenly began to emanate brilliant light as if they were burning. A vast expanse of scintillating light fell on Helena, draping a veil of light over her body. Hetty looked up at Helena with tears shimmering in her reverent eyes. "How many of our brethren returned this month?" Helena withdrew her gaze and the starlight receded. "There was a total of 204 elven brethren who have returned, 36 of which returned voluntarily, while the others were all sent back. Most of them aren't very powerful, there are only 20 elves at or above the 4th tier, and all of them have been conscripted into the Guardian Squad and the major families," Hetty replied. "That's nowhere near enough." Helena's brows furrowed as she said, "Increase the wages for those capturing high-tier elves. What we want are brethren who can directly contribute to the power of the Guardian Squad, not manual laborers. Tell those stupid demons that if they continue to placate us like this, we'll cease our cooperation with them." "Yes." Hetty nodded before hurrying out the cave. "We have to speed up this process. The old king in Rodo won't live for much longer. As soon as Josh takes the throne, the united human and elven army will sweep through the entire continent," Helena murmured to herself. "Your Highness, you've been locked in detention again, and it's for an entire year this time. What should we do?" Beneath the Tree of Life, Pyrrhus looked at Irina with a concerned expression. Snare stood beside them, also with a concerned look on his face. He hadn't anticipated that the princess would be so decisive as to kill Schubert straight away. However, her actions had most likely successfully intimidated everyone involved. Being locked in detention isn't a big deal, what's there to worry about? Back when I left the Wind Forest, I was right in the middle of a detention period. If I want to leave, no one can stop me. Irina pinched Pyrrhus' nose with a nonchalant smile as she said, "Don't worry about me, Pyrrhus. You don't have the spare brain capacity anyway." Pyrrhus looked at Irina and opened her mouth, but she discovered that she didn't have any response to that. She had participated in Irina's last escape from the Wind Forest. Even though she had only played a minor role, with the blessings from the Tree of Life, she was sure that no one could stop Irina from leaving the Wind Forest. Irina turned to Snare, and said, "Snare, I have a few things that I need you to do." "I'd be happy to be of service, Your Highness." Snare nodded respectfully. "I'll have to trouble you to continue searching for Alex and my daughter. Judging from Alex's personality, after suffering such an ordeal, he definitely wouldn't remain in Rodu or the Roth Empire. He's most likely at the Demon Islands, Dragon Island, or in Chaos City. We've been to those 3 places many times, so we are quite familiar with them. I'm going to write down a few locations for you to search, perhaps you'll find some leads. I'm also going to write a few letters for you to deliver to some of my friends who will be able to help you. However, after what happened with Josh, I'm not sure if some of them are still worthy of my trust, so try your best to refrain from telling them about Alex," Irina instructed. "I'll be sure to keep that confidential." Snare nodded with a serious expression. Irina nodded before continuing, "News of Schubert's death will most likely have already spread to Rodu, so you'll definitely be on their blacklist. Hence, before everything dies down, you have to make sure to never go to the Roth Empire again. Also, constantly be on your guard, there are most likely members of our own elven race who want to bring you down as well." "No problem, my specialty lies in lurking in the shadows." Snare nodded with a confident expression. He then hesitated momentarily before asking, "Your Highness, did you kill Schubert just to avenge Master Alex and the young mistress, or was your intention to abolish slavery and the family system in the elven laws?" "Your Highness, the family system is already deeply rooted in the elven race. If you want to abolish it, you'll be making enemies out of all of the major families. Ferris turned to Irina with a concerned expression upon hearing that. That's right, I'm trying to abolish the family system so our elven brethren can have true freedom. Irina nodded with a grave expression as she said, so what if it's a deeply rooted system? I'll just have the uproot the entire thing. Freedom is the soul of us elves, and what Helena is doing is crushing that soul. Having all of the major families turn on me isn't a scary prospect, as all of the other elves will side with me. What I need now is time, and a year of detention is just enough. Ferris and Snare's eyes both lit up. All right, you two can go for now. I'll give you the letter tomorrow. A hint of exhaustion flashed through Irina's eyes. Snare and Ferris both nodded before leaving the cave. Irina sat down beneath the tree and looked up. The branches of the Tree of Life parted, allowing the moonlight to shine down on her through the opening of the cave. Alex, my daughter, where are you? When will I be able to see you again? Irina murmured to herself. Do you want to eat the moon, little Amy? Mag asked with a smile. I do. The moon is so round and white, it looks delicious. Amy looked up at the moon with yearning in her eyes. A smile crept onto Mag's face upon seeing that. This little foodie wanted to eat everything that she saw. However, he had had the exact same thought when he was a child, so he really looked forward to the moon festival every year as it was an occasion where he could dine on delicious mooncakes. At the time, he'd been naive enough to believe that mooncakes were actual moons plucked from the sky, which was why they were so delicious. As such, he'd cherished each and every piece of mooncake he ate. The moon isn't easy to pluck from the sky, but if you want to eat it, I can try to make it into mooncake for you. Mag looked at Amy with a smile. Using the moon to make mooncake? That sounds delicious. I want to eat mooncake. When will I be able to eat mooncake? Amy's eyes lit up as she clapped her little hands together with elation. Ugly Duckling's body was contorted into a strange shape as a result, but it was also looking up at Mag with yearning in its eyes. Mag shook his head as he replied, it'll have to be in 3 more days. The moon isn't in its roundest for yet, so it's not ripe to be picked. The best time to pick it will be when it's as round as a plate. We can then make it into a mooncake and share it with friends, that's when it'll be most delicious. Oh, I see. It must be super delicious. Amy nodded with a thoughtful expression. She then turned to Mag with a curious look, and asked, Father, why do you know how to make mooncake? In my hometown, we held a festival called the Moon Festival every year. On that occasion, relatives and families would gather together to eat mooncakes. It's a festival of reunion. Mag smiled as he provided an explanation. Even though he had already accepted this world, he still missed his parents with the Moon Festival on the horizon. He thought back to his childhood where he had sat in his mother's lap while eating mooncake under an osmanthus tree, and a hint of nostalgia washed over him. Reunion. A hint of hope appeared in Amy's eyes as she looked up at Mag, and asked, Father, will Mother be coming to reunite with us? Under the starry night sky, Amy held Ugly Duckling in her arms as she looked up with a hint of nervous yearning in her eyes. Mag felt as if a sharp knife had been driven into his heart at the sight of the yearning in Amy's eyes. He had thought that he had already done a good job as a parent, but Amy still yearned for her mother. It was just like when she was sleep-talking last time, the desire for maternal love was not something that she could hide. Mag didn't know what Amy's concept of her mother was like, as he had been avoiding the topic this entire time. He didn't want Amy to realize that their family was incomplete, as that would only bring her sadness and misery. However, it appeared that his efforts were in vain. She had already made that realization for herself, and only refrained from mentioning it as she could sense that Mag was reluctant to touch the topic. Her thoughtfulness made Mag's heart throb with pain and self-criticism. Even though it wasn't his fault that she was missing her mother, a good father shouldn't be dancing around the topic. Your mother is living on the moon, but father isn't able to get her down from there to reunite with us quite yet. Someday, I'll be able to build a long ladder that extends all the way up to the moon with my food. We'll be able to get her down to reunite with us." Mag looked into Amy's eyes with a serious expression. "Really? Mother lives on the moon?" Amy's eyes lit up as she looked up at the bright moon in the sky. However, she then pouted with a concerned expression as she said, "But the moon is so far away and it looks so cold there. Mother must be very lonely there, right? She must be so cold and hungry too." "Don't worry, your mother is super powerful. She's looking down at us from above, so she won't feel lonely. She'll wait until we can go and save her." Mag held Amy gently in his arms as he whispered, "You'll be able to see your mother very soon." "I'll make sure of that," Mag added in his heart. Rising up 2 tiers in a month was already good progress, but it appeared that he had to speed up a bit more. "I believe in you, father. You're so awesome, mother must be super awesome as well." Amy nodded with a smile on her little face. She turned to Mag with an expectant look, and asked, "But father, what does mother look like? I'm really curious." "Your mother is the most beautiful woman in this world. She has long silver hair and blue eyes like yours, she's very kind and is a great singer and dancer." Mag actually didn't have any recollection of Irina, either, so he could only deduce her physical traits from Amy's appearance. The most beautiful woman in the world. Amy's eyes were shimmering with joy as she wound her arms around Mag's neck and giggled as she said, "Father is so impressive to be able to marry a woman as beautiful as mother." "Who do you think the most handsome man in the world is?" Mag asked with a smile. "It's father, of course." Amy immediately replied. An elated smile appeared on Mag's face. Amy sure was honest. "Father, you said it's going to be Moon Festival in a few days, we have to eat mooncakes and share them with our friends. Are we inviting friends over like last time?" Amy asked. "This time, it's going to be a little different. We might be sharing the mooncakes with all of our customers to celebrate the Moon Festival." Mag shook his head with a smile before adding, "I'm not sure about the specific details yet, though. I haven't made the mooncakes yet." Mag still had to discuss with the system about making mooncakes. There was a chance that the system wouldn't provide the required recipe and tools, so he didn't want to make any promises. "I see. It would be great to have so many to share our mooncakes with. Mother would be really happy to see us eating mooncakes from above, right?" Amy turned to look at Mag. "I think she will be." Mag nodded with a smile. He was suddenly rather curious about what the elven princess was currently thinking and whether she missed Amy as well. "Good night, mother." After playing on the balcony for a little, Mag carried Amy downstairs to tuck her into bed. Before entering the room, Amy waved up at the moon in the sky before laying her head against Mag's chest with a sweet smile on her little face. She's so easy to satisfy. Even though he had lied to her, he was definitely going to fulfill that promise. No matter how difficult the task was going to be, he would definitely reunite Amy with her mother and give them a safe and happy life. He had only just made it to the 2nd floor, but both Amy and Ugly Duckling were already asleep. Amy wore a sweet smile on her face as if she were having a good dream. Mag gently took her shoes off and tucked her in along with Ugly Duckling. Amy cuddled Ugly Duckling in her arms, and laid her chin on its head. A smile of contentment widened on her face as she murmured, "Mother, you're so beautiful, what an adorable little girl." A smile appeared Mag's face as he planted a kiss on Amy's forehead. He then strode over to the bathroom with his pajamas held in his hand as he checked the reward he had received for the restaurant's upgrade the day prior. Beers and kebabs were one of Mag's favorite food combinations. On a summer night, a big glass of icy beer coupled with an unlimited supply of kebabs was a heavenly duo. He opened the beer brewing experience bag, and a burst of information appeared in his mind. It's that easy. Mag was expecting a set of complex instructions, but the so-called beer brewing method was even easier than making ice cream. A fully automatic beer brewing machine was the answer to all of his problems. All Mag had to do was to put the ingredients into the machine in a set ratio, then press the start button, and wait. Due to the space constraints of your kitchen and the fact that beer brewing has very little correlation with cooking skills, the system has invented a highly efficient beer brewing machine. Don't mistake this machine for the average beer brewing machine. In order to minimize its size and maximize its efficiency, the system has incorporated several types of cutting-edge technology into the machine's design. Not only can food safety be ensured, the variation of the amount of bubbles in the beer is restricted to a range of 0.1%. The system's voice was quite smug as it gave that description. That sounds good, but isn't it a little overkill just for a beer brewing machine? Mag raised an eyebrow with a skeptical expression. Please do not doubt the system's decision-making skills. The system's serious voice sounded. All right. Mag rolled his eyes before asking, if beer brewing is so simple, then would I still have to practice it in the test field for the god of cookery? The beer brewing method is quite simple, but the proportions of the ingredients used must be regulated by you. There are also certain storage methods to use after the beer has been brewed, so you'll have to work hard to create the most perfect beer. As such, it should still be practiced in the test field for the god of cookery, the system replied. Mag contemplated momentarily before arriving at a decision. Brewing beer in the kitchen would just be a waste of space. Your beer brewing machine may not be as big as a full-sized industrial one, but it's still about as big as a fridge. Why don't we put it in that spare room on the 3rd floor? That will be wine cellar from now on. All right. Would you like to enter the test field for the god of cookery now? The system asked. Let me have a look at the beef kebab experience bag first so I can decide whether I want to work on both of them at once tonight, Mag replied as he opened the other shiny golden experience bag in his mind. Experience and techniques related to cooking beef kebabs flooded into his mind, creating a stark contrast with the simple beer brewing method, and catching Mag completely off guard with the massive influx of information. Only after about 2 minutes did he manage to return to his senses. Wow, I didn't think a beef kebab recipe would be so complex. I feel like this is the biggest challenge I've ever faced. Mag shook his dizzy head with a surprised expression. The kebab appeared to be a simple food item to produce, but everything involved in marinating the beef, skewering the meat, moderating the flames and heat, the timing when applying condiments, all of those factors required extremely precise and stringent control. Extreme proficiency in roasting meat was required of a chef if they wanted to cook a perfect kebab. They had to perfect every single step in the process, and it was clearly a level of skill that an average street-side vendor could never hope to reach. I'll start with beer brewing today, then use the remaining time to consolidate my newfound strength. I'll focus on optimizing the training in my sword forms and learn to cook kebabs tomorrow. Mag made up his mind after a brief period of contemplation. Cooking kebabs was a whole new test for him. Very little of the cooking experience that he had accrued thus far was applicable here, and he didn't know how much time and effort he would need to expend to master this new dish. In his past life, he had had kebabs countless times, so he had surely given a lot of criticisms toward the dish. He feared to imagine what kind of insane demands he had stated when it came to his image of the ideal kebab. If he were to be trapped in the test field for the god of cookery for an entire night just to work on making kebabs, it would be quite a waste. After taking a quick shower, Mag put on his pajamas before tucking the corners of Amy's blanket more firmly around her. A smile appeared on his face as he looked at her adorable sleeping face, and he retired to his own bed. He closed his eyes before entering the test field for the god of cookery with his consciousness. A white light flashed, and he arrived in a small room. This time, the venue was not a kitchen. Instead, it was that spare room on the 3rd floor. To the left, a silver metallic contraption that was taller than a grown man was positioned against the wall. All types of metal tubes and funnels were attached to the contraption, giving it a very high-end, cutting-edge feel. Beside the beer brewing machine, there were a few wooden barrels containing malt, hops, and yeast. Beside those barrels were a few more wooden barrels, but those were empty, and were most likely designated for the beer that was to be produced. Using such cutting-edge technology to produce a beer brewing machine is a horrendous waste. Mag strode over and began to inspect the high-tech beer brewing machine. As a man who was well-versed in mechanics, he had a lot of insight to offer on this subject. Furthermore, he had visited Germany's Erdinger brewery in his past life, so he also had some knowledge about beer brewing. System: can this machine produce beer that's as good as Erdinger breweries? Mag asked internally. The Erdinger brewery was the frontrunner when it came to beer brewing in Germany, with a status that was akin to that of Tsingtao beer in China. It wasn't an extremely high-end brand, but they produced a few beers that Mag thoroughly enjoyed. He wasn't a fan of premium beer like Budweiser and Carlsberg. Instead, he preferred draft beer like Snow beer and Tsingtao beer. Those types of beer with a few ice cubes were Mag's image of the ideal summer beverage. Please do not compare beer produced by the system to other inferior products. The cutting-edge technology utilized in creating this machine ensures perfection in every single facet. Furthermore, aside from that, the system has also carefully sourced ingredients from all over the Norland continent. The barley planted in the northwestern plains of the Twilight Forest receive over 16 hours of sun exposure per day, allowing the crops to accumulate incomparable sugar content. Only the best of those crops were chosen for crossbreeding to produce the perfect barley. The hops were planted in the Merlot River region, and went through several generations of selective breeding to create the ideal crop. The hops have a really outstanding aroma, and produce an abundance of bubbles. They can truly be referred to as a supreme breed of hops. The yeast was produced after combining many types of different yeasts. Countless experiments were conducted to create the perfect combination, allowing it to drastically shorten the brewing period and also give the beer a superior taste. The system's voice was very smug as it launched into a detailed introduction, and it sounded as if it were begging Mag to praise it. "That's all right." Mag nodded in response. "That's all you have to say?" The system was in disbelief. It was unwilling to accept such a blasé answer, and continued, "Such a superb beer brewing machine, such high-end beer brewing ingredients, so much hard work and dedication, that really is quite all right." Mag nodded earnestly. "Would it kill you to pay the system a compliment? So much time and effort were expended to produce the perfect beer, and all of you have to say is, 'That's all right,'" the system roared with indignation. Then, "Whoa, not bad." Mag nodded with a smile. "Not bad? Not bad my A*s." The system's enraged voice sounded as an angry emoji floated through Mag's mind. Mag did his best to suppress his laughter. As expected, irking the system was always a pleasant experience. It was quickly becoming his favorite pastime. "System, you're going to charge for those ingredients, right?" Mag asked. "Of course," the system snapped in reply. It was clearly still very angry at Mag's reaction, or lack thereof. "If you're selling it to me, then don't expect compliments. You're getting paid for your efforts, so your products should always be the best." Mag pursed his lips in response. After having some fun messing with the system, the smile on Mag's face receded, and was replaced by a serious expression. He began to measure out ingredients according to the instructions stipulated in the beer brewing experience bag in his mind, and then placed the ingredients in their respective slots on the machine in proper order. During his brief cooking career thus far, the most notable change that Mag had undergone was that he was now able to concentrate on something a lot more easily. Regardless of what time it was, as soon as he began cooking, he would be able to quickly get himself into the zone. That was a trait that all top chefs had to possess. After confirming that all of the required ingredients had been added, Mag pressed a button on the machine. The machine worked practically soundlessly through recycling steam. Only a small flashing red light on the machine indicated that the brewing process had begun. Otherwise, one could be forgiven for thinking that the machine wasn't working at all. As expected, technology is the key to changing this world. In other words, this world is being transformed by the system. Mag heaved an internal sigh of emotion. The system's technological advancement outstripped that of present-day Earth by several decades, and this gap was relentlessly increasing after absorbing all of the technology on Earth. The system was able to make its own improvements in order to enhance that foundation. That showed an incredible potential. I feel like someone is praising the system. The system's voice sounded. It's just your imagination, Mag gave a calm reply. The waiting time for brewing was infinitely compressed in the test field for the god of cookery. Soon, the flashing red light turned green, and a notification sound was heard from the machine. Mag placed one of the large empty wooden barrels beneath an opening before unlocking the valve. Clear and translucent beer passed through the transparent metallic tube, flowing directly into the empty barrel. The rich yet refreshing aroma of beer immediately wafted throughout the entire room, giving one a sense of entrancement. The aroma is quite special, it's a little like pure draft snow beer, but a little richer, and is also intermingled with hints of German beer undertones. Just the aroma alone makes me want to drink a glass. This really is superb beer. Mag's eyes lit up with praise. He had sampled all types of beer from cheap supermarket beer to prized premium beers. However, it was the first time that he had encountered a beer capable of drawing him in with its aroma alone. The intricate beer brewing process clearly played a role in this, but the key here was clearly the superb ingredients that the system had harvested. As expected, the system never disappointed. System, this beer has reached the required standard. Mag was very confident. Ding! This beer is not up to the required standard. The proportions of the ingredients used were minutely inaccurate. More precision is required. At the same time, you must prevent the moisture and bacteria in the air from intermingling with the beer during the packing process. Otherwise, the quality of the beer will be compromised, the system replied. I see. Mag furrowed his brows, but didn't argue with the system. He was already used to being rejected, and besides, it wasn't a bad thing that there was room for improvement. After discarding the first batch of beer, Mag took even more care in measuring out the ingredients. He ensured that every single grain of barley was placed into the machine before beginning the brewing process again. This cycle repeated over and over again, with the system picking out 1-minute issue after another, forcing Mag to make further adjustments. Mag was thoroughly enjoying the process of improving himself through relentless trial and error. In any case, the time on the wall indicated that not even a day had passed in the test field. In comparison to the dishes he had honed in the past, this was a far simpler process, and he only had to exercise more care and precision. Mag poured out a large glass of translucent golden beer from the machine. He looked at beer and froth in the glass, which were at a 2:1 ratio, and asked, "How about this batch, system?" Ding! According to your requirements in your past life, 1. The color must be golden and clear with no impurities, and the aroma must be rich yet not overwhelming achieved. 2. There must be an abundance of resilient pristine white froth taking up a third of the glass, and it can remain intact for more than 5 minutes achieved. 3. The beer must be refreshing and smooth, but not lacking in body. It must have a strong flavor, but leave no lasting aftertaste. The flavor must be slightly bitter but very energetic, leaving the drinker wanting more achieved. All 3 of those requirements have been achieved, so this beer lives up to the standards that you stipulated in your past life. Its quality outstrips that of all beers on Earth. The system was seemingly very proud. I brewed the beer, what are you sounding so smug for? Mag took a whiff of the fragrant glass of beer with a smile on his face. The system planted and harvested the ingredients, and created the beer brewing machine. You're just a manual laborer, so why shouldn't I feel proud? The system retorted. This is the first time I've seen such an arrogant farmer. Mag pursed his lips. Do not insult the system by using the title farmer. The system was quite vexed. All right, ingredients vendor. Mag nodded. That's a better term, the system replied. It's just a fancy way of saying farmer. Mag raised an eyebrow. No. The term farmer gives one the impression of a hillbilly toiling away in a field all day, while the title ingredients vendor is a lot more high class. That's a title that corresponds with the system's air of dignity and professionalism, the system corrected sternly. But I feel like calling you farmer is less of a mouthful, Mag murmured in reply. Before the system could say anything, he continued, all right, I'm going to practice my sword forms now. System, I want to rent this space. The system grumbled something unintelligibly before asking, would you like to drink this glass of beer? No. Alcohol will impair my cognitive functions. If I ended up getting drunk and cutting myself, that would be a disaster, Mag refused. White light flashed and the small room instantly transformed into a cavernous space with a long sword plunged into the ground. Mag strode forward and pulled the long sword out from the ground. He calmed himself down before abruptly thrusting his sword forward and performing a set of sword forms. His motions were fast and powerful, and his sword glided soundlessly through the air, but it somehow gave off a peerlessly sharp feel. Time flew past, and Mag was completely absorbed in performing his sword forms. After purchasing his latest strength point, he had unlocked 2 more of the 13 swordplay forms. At the same time, his speed, power, and explosiveness had also experienced marked enhancements. The constitution of a 1st-tier knight, the swordsmanship of a 4th-tier knight, and the mind of a 10th-tier knight. What a strange combination! Mag chuckled as he paused to rest momentarily. In the dark night, there was a figure fully clothed in black standing in a small courtyard. He turned to Seuss, and whispered, Master, are we going to leave Chaos City now? There were a few other figures clad in black in the courtyard, and they were also looking at Seuss. We haven't received any orders yet, but the news from the Demon Islands is quite urgent. If Alex really is still alive and he discovers that we're looking for him, it's very likely that he'll disappear again. Seuss' voice was rather grim. The black-robed figure hesitated momentarily before asking, but Master, our higher UPS say that Alex could still be in Chaos City. Are we just going to give up? We've been searching Chaos City for about half a month now, and we've been to every possible place, but there's clearly no disabled person with a half-elf little girl here. Alex was extremely severely crippled 3 years ago, so it won't be easy for him to hide his disability. We've planted so many spies in Chaos City, but none of them were able to find any leads. That indicates that he's most likely not here. Seuss shook his head in response. He turned to the black-robed figure with his dead fish eyes, and said coldly, I fought him once and I know what kind of man he is. Even as a cripple, he definitely won't discard his honor as a knight, so there's no need to waste time on red herrings. I know you have your suspicions about the owner of that Mamie restaurant, but I can tell you now that there's no way that Alex would become a chef. Besides, he had been reduced to a quadriplegic, not even a 10th-tier magic caster could help him recover. We need to find him as soon as possible, and we can't afford to be led on a wild goose chase by someone that's clearly not him. Yes. The black-robed figure's expression changed upon hearing that, and he lowered his head in submission. Take a group of people and keep searching Chaos City. Everyone else, come with me to the Demon Islands. Seuss scanned his eyes across everyone present, and his harrowing gaze sent shivers running down everyone's spines. What a beautiful morning! The next morning, Mag got up when the sun was just beginning to rise. He crept carefully over to Amy's little bed, and a smile appeared on his face at the sight of her sleeping countenance. After that, he brushed his teeth, got changed, and went downstairs. After the enhancements from system, Mag's physical constitution had reached the standard of a 1st-tier knight. It wasn't very high, but it was far superior to a normal person's. His body was roughly comparable to that of a professional boxer, and he felt full of power and energy. To be able to recover to this extent from my quadriplegic state, the system is quite reliable, after all. Mag did some stretches, and was very pleased with his newly gained strength. In the past, his biggest concern was that he would have to live as a cripple for the rest of his life. However, those doubts had been completely erased. "System, can you give me a recipe for mooncakes?" Mag asked internally. At the same time, he pushed open the door to the small room on the third floor. Within the room, the beer brewing machine, beer brewing ingredients, and barrels were all still situated in the same positions as the night prior. "No," the system's reply was very fast and decisive. "I'll pay for it." Mag was unwilling to give up. "The answer is still no. Please do not use money to insult the system has a bottom line to uphold," the system replied sternly. Mag raised his eyebrows upon hearing that. It was true that the system had never made any concessions when it came to handing out recipes. That was most likely related to its so-called 3 major rules. "System, why haven't you been issuing any missions recently? Hurry up and give me a mission. Each and every day without a mission is torturous for me. Also, the prize doesn't need to be anything special, a mooncake recipe will suffice," Mag requested. "The system doesn't have any missions to issue at the moment," the system refused. "Then just make up one on the spot. Don't you have prerequisites to trigger missions? Tell me what those triggers are," Mag persisted. "Please don't force the system to issue missions. That would be a major breach of the rules, and would place the system in a very difficult position." The system remained very firm in its stance. "How much money will it cost for you to issue a mission? 100 gold coins, 1,000 gold coins, 10,000 gold coins?" Mag asked. Well, if it's 10,000 gold coins, the system was finally beginning to waver. "I refuse, 10,000 gold coins? What a rip-off!" Mag rolled his eyes. The system responded with an ellipsis. "Looks like we'll have to discuss this another time. The moon will be at its fullest in 3 days, I have to make some mooncakes for that occasion. Otherwise, the moon festival celebrations will be ruined," Mag thought to himself. "The brewing time required is 1 day. Even though it's not as fast as it was in the test field for the god of cookery, it's already a drastic improvement compared to normal beer brewing technology." After loading the ingredients into the machine, all Mag had to do was to press a button, and the beer would be ready after 24 hours. He had to load the beer into the barrels at the first possible opportunity in order to prevent the infiltration of moisture and bacteria. The machine was extremely efficient, able to yield 3 barrels of beer per batch. After closing the door to the small room, Mag went downstairs and began to prepare the required ingredients for the breakfast service. When it was almost time to open for business, he went upstairs to rouse Amy. Mag had only just made his way over to Amy's little bed when she opened her eyes. She turned to Mag with elation, and said, "Father, I dreamed of Mother last night. She was sitting under a huge glowing tree, and she was so beautiful and kind. She held me in her arms and sang for me." "Really? Did she say anything to our little Amy?" Mag patted Amy's head with a smile. It seemed that she had been awake for a while, and was intentionally waiting for him to come upstairs for her. "She did. She said that she really wanted to eat mooncakes. She's living on the moon and she wants to eat the moon as well. Father, can we make mooncakes and eat them in Mother's stead?" Amy asked earnestly. "Of course. I'll have them ready soon." Mag's heart throbbed as he looked at Amy's earnest expression. He gently caressed her hair as he said, "All right, let's have some breakfast, you've got morning classes today." "All right." Amy happily wrapped her arms around Mag's neck and planted a kiss on his cheek. After breakfast, Mag escorted Amy to school. When he arrived back at the restaurant, Yabimiya and Sally were already waiting for him at its entrance. Sally appeared to be quite troubled by something, and looked to have suffered a sleepless night. Mag looked at Sally and hesitated momentarily, but decided not to say anything in the end. He didn't know what had happened between Sally and Blower the night prior, and it wasn't a subject that he should pry into. After all, everyone had their secrets. Yabimiya was clearly also quite worried about Sally, but she, too, suppressed the urge to ask her anything. After a busy breakfast service, Mag closed the restaurant doors and heaved a sigh of relief. Sally and Yabimiya quickly cleaned up the restaurant, thereby capping off a morning's work. Sally looked at Mag and hesitated for a long while before asking, Boss, can I ask you a question? Sure, go ahead. Mag turned to Sally with a warm expression and nodded. Sally hesitated momentarily before asking, what do you think is true freedom? Mag contemplated her question for a short while before replying, I think freedom is the right to choose. Everyone has different opinions and perspectives, but for me, I think I have freedom as long as I have the right of choice. The right to choose. A contemplative expression appeared on Sally's face. She thought of the elven servants being forced into manual labor in the major families. When they were forcibly distributed into or even captured by major families, they had no choice. When the nobles commanded the work, they had no choice. They didn't even have a choice to stay or leave. That means they're not free. Sally's heart immediately sank after arriving at that conclusion. In reality, she had already reached that verdict the night prior, and she simply didn't want to admit it to herself. Sally fell silent momentarily, and then asked, what's more important between safety and freedom? Mag thought about this question carefully before replying, I feel like that question should be answered individually. Everyone will have a different answer. Some are willing to give up freedom to a certain extent in exchange for safety, while others would rather live in constant peril than have their freedom restricted. In the face of such a decision, perhaps only those who can choose one or the other are truly free. Indeed, there were always some people who would rather die free than live in shackles. Sally nodded with a thoughtful expression and fell silent again. She looked down at the wooden grains on the surface of the table before her and fell into deep thought. Mag withdrew his gaze from Sally and didn't say anything further. The topic of freedom was a very arbitrary one, and everyone would have a different answer depending on their personality and experiences. The question of true freedom was akin to the conundrum of the chicken and the egg. Safety, responsibility, duty, moral compass. Those factors would often clash with one's pursuit for freedom. There were no beings that were truly completely free in this world. The ideal state to be in was to find a balance where one could live in comfort yet still feel free and unbridled. Mag wasn't going to try and convince Sally of anything, as he didn't know anything about the situation that she was in. Furthermore, he was quite surprised that this conundrum would arise as her main concern following her meeting with Blower. Yabimiya was slightly concerned as she looked at Sally. However, she didn't think that she could contribute a better answer than Mag had, so she could only remain silent. Sally had been thinking about something for an entire morning, while Yabimiya was being instructed by Mag in the art of ice cream making. Yabimiya didn't exactly have extraordinary cooking aptitude. However, her earnest attitude and tenacity were very pleasing to Mag. All of the failed batches of ice cream were stored in the fridge by Mag. After all, the cost per unit of ice cream produced was several dozens of copper coins, and it would be a waste to throw them out. However, he was concerned that eating them all at once would result in digestive problems, so he could only store them in the fridge. In any case, he had already thought of a way to put them to good use. Boss, what about this one? Yabimiya carefully cradled the ice cream cone in her hands as if she were holding a priceless treasure. She looked at Mag with an expectant expression as she offered up the ice cream cone for his examination. The two balls of ice cream were perfectly stacked on top of one another without being even the slightest bit off-center. It was a picture of perfection. No, the top ball is still a tiny bit off. In that case, the direction that ice cream flows in as it melts will be uneven. Mag shook his head in response. Oh, I see. Yabimiya's face immediately fell upon hearing that. In her eyes, there wasn't any sign suggesting that the balls of ice cream were off-center. She glanced at the dozen or so failed ice cream batches in the fridge, and heaved a dejected sigh as she asked, Boss, I'm really stupid, right? I've wasted so much ice cream, but I still can't do it. If a talented girl like you is considered stupid, then what would I be? It took me over 100 tries to reach your current level. Mag smiled in response. Really? A hint of hope intermingled with disbelief lit up in Yabimiya's eyes. That's right. You've already done very well. It's just that Mamie Restaurant serves only the best food to our customers, so you can settle for nothing but the best. That is a rule of our restaurant, and also the most basic requirement. Mag nodded with a smile. He felt like he was very much like the system when he was being stern. The only difference was that the system would never offer kind words of consolation no matter how many times he failed. I understand. Yabimiya nodded earnestly with a reverent look in her eyes as she looked at Mag. Only perfect dishes could be served to their customers, that was an attitude and motto that was worthy of respect. Would you like to unlock encouragement services? The system has a bank of over 50,000 consolatory and uplifting phrases to comfort you following your failures. You only need to spend 1 copper coin per phrase. If you activate this service now, you'll be eligible for a massive deal where the first 500 phrases will be free. The system's voice sounded along with cheery background music. Are you serious? Mag raised an eyebrow upon hearing that. He didn't think that the system was this desperate for money. Ding! Congratulations, you have been awarded an encouragement services free trial. This free trial comes with 10 free phrases, would you like to hear them now? The system asked. All right. Mag was a little skeptical, but he decided that it couldn't hurt. Always do your best. Even though it might be trash. Failure is not disgraceful. What is disgraceful is that you're still naive enough to believe that. When you feel like you're ugly, poor, and have no redeeming traits. Don't wallow in despair, at least you have sound judgment. Piss off. Mag rolled his eyes internally. These weren't encouragement service, the system was trying to drive him to depression. Mag picked up a wafer cone and made a mocha ice cream. The 2 balls of ice cream were stacked perfectly on top of one another with their centers forming a perfectly straight line with the tip of cone. It was like a work of art. Give that to Aisha. We'll end our practice here for today and continue tomorrow. Have some dessert, it'll put you in a good mood. Mag handed the mocha ice cream to Yabimiya with a smile. The high rankings secured in the Aiden Square food competition brought a lot of new customers to Mamie Restaurant. The unanimous praise given to the restaurant by the existing customer base further contributed to this trend. Thus, the small restaurant situated in the westernmost corner of the Aiden Square had become quite renowned. Due to the excessive number of customers visiting the restaurant every day, many customers chose to order their food on a takeaway basis in order to vacate their seats as soon as possible. Some could resist the urge to eat the food until they got home, but the majority of them lacked that willpower, and began feasting as soon as they made it out the door. Grandpa, what's that in her hand? It looks really delicious. On a long street in the Aiden Square, a little elf pointed at the ice cream cone in a little girl's hand with a curious expression. Her large eyes were wide with intrigue, and she couldn't help but salivate at the sight of the joyful expression the little girl wore as she licked her ice cream. The little elf appeared to be around 5 or 6 years old, and she was wearing a slightly worn pink dress. Her long golden hair was tied into a long braid behind her, and her pointy little ears wiggled with curiosity. Beside her stood an elderly elf in a set of old grey robes. His face was heavily wrinkled and coarse, and his hair and beard were all snowy white. However, he wore a doting expression on his face as he looked down at the elven girl, and asked, "Anna, do you want to try it?" Anna immediately nodded in response before looking up at the old elf with an expectant gaze. "Can I, Grandpa?" "Of course you can, we just need to find out which restaurant is selling this food item." Joshua nodded with a smile. Then I can ask her where she bought it." Anna's eyes lit up as a solution occurred to her. "There's no need for that. Look, all of those people are coming from that direction. I'm sure we'll be able to find the restaurant if we go in that direction. Joshua pointed to the passers-by, many of whom were holding ice cream cones, on the street. Yes. Let's go then, Grandpa. Anna's eyes lit up as she dragged Joshua in that direction. Slow down. Joshua gave a resigned smile, but the doting light remained in his eyes as he looked at Anna. I haven't been to Chaos City for over 2 decades, and a lot has changed. It's becoming more and more prosperous. Joshua looked around with amazement. 8 decades ago, his situation was quite similar to that of all the other elves who had left the Wind Forest. He felt like the elven race was developing in a direction that was quite unappealing, and he was getting sick of living in the place that he'd once loved. He didn't want to create a family to take advantage of the new social system being implemented, so he chose to leave the Wind Forest and wander around the Norland continent. During his travels, he often encountered beings from other races that harbored animosity toward him. Danger was unavoidable, but to him, the experience was rather fun. At the very least, he felt alive on the road, and he often encountered interesting people and things, so he was quite happy. However, over a decade ago, he gradually began to discover that a hidden force had set their sight on him, trying to force him back to the Wind Forest. Many other wandering elves were also coming to the same realization. Some of them tried to lure the wandering elves back with promises of lavish rewards, while others simply abducted elves by force. In any case, the movement was picking up more and more steam, and the methods used were becoming more and more drastic. Most wandering elves were alone or consisted of small families. How were they supposed to contend with such a powerful force? I hope that at least Anna can have a happy childhood. If we go back to the Wind Forest, she'll probably never know what it feels like to be free. Joshua held onto Anna's little hand and heaved an internal sigh at the sight of her innocent smile. It's here. Grandpa, this is where everyone is coming from. Anna dragged Joshua in front of a restaurant. She looked at all of the little kids with ice cream cones in their hands, and her eyes lit up with excitement. It is, indeed. A smile also appeared on Joshua's face. He was a little surprised to see that a restaurant situated in the corner of the Aiden Square could be so popular. He didn't have time to contemplate that notion, though, as Anna was tugging on his arm as she dragged him toward the restaurant. What a beautiful restaurant, it's like a palace. The food here smells so good. After entering the restaurant, the lively and energetic Anna suddenly became very quiet and reserved. She took a step closer to Joshua, and inspected the surroundings with a slightly shy and apprehensive expression. Her gaze lingered on the dishes on the tables, and she felt as if all of them appeared very delicious. These tables and chairs appear to have been constructed from a SAHDR tree from the Wind Forest, and they're all cut out from the same tree. Is the restaurant owner an elf as well? Joshua's gaze was immediately drawn to the furniture in the restaurant, and there was a hint of surprise intermingled with wistfulness in his eyes. A SAHDR tree of this size had to be at least 200 years old. Welcome. There are 2 empty seats over there, please take a seat. Yabimiya stepped forward and greeted them with a smile. At the same time, she was a little surprised to see that both of them were elves. It seemed that the restaurant had been getting a lot of elven customers lately. Sure. Joshua nodded as he led Anna toward the table with the 2 vacant seats. However, his footsteps faltered upon seeing Blower, who was also sitting at the same table, and a hesitant expression appeared on his face. Anna's expression also stiffened at the sight of Blower, and she hid behind Joshua as if she were a little afraid of Blower. They must be wandering elves, right? Why is that little girl so scared of me? Blower had also noticed Joshua and Anna, and he was rather confused about their reactions at seeing him, but he still gave them a warm and friendly smile. The gentle smile coupled with his handsome face made onlookers feel as if a warm spring breeze were blowing through their hearts, and Constantine was momentarily stunned as he sat beside Blower. He doesn't look like a bad person. In any case, this is Chaos City, so we should be safe here. Joshua hesitated momentarily as he looked Blower, but still led Anna to that table in the end. What a handsome big brother! Anna was still hiding behind Joshua, but she couldn't help but steal furtive glances at Blower. Are they wandering elves? Sally had also noticed the two of them, and was feeling quite sympathetic at the sight of Anna's fearful display. That's ice cream. If you would like to order one, you can pick a flavor first. There are 4 flavors to choose from. Yabimiya flipped open the menu to the ice cream page for them in a thoughtful gesture. Joshua's brows furrowed momentarily at the sight of the 200 copper coin price on the menu, but he quickly put on a smile as he turned to Anna. Which flavor would you like, Anna? Wow! Anna's eyes were shimmering as she looked at the images of the 4 different flavored ice creams on the menu. She couldn't help but inch her face closer to the menu, overwhelmed by the choices presented to her. Anna? That's a great name. If you want to try an ice cream, I suggest the mocha flavor, it's super delicious. Even though Blower had been given the cold shoulder, he was still appraising Anna with a warm smile. Anna looked at Blower again and didn't say anything, but her gaze had indeed been drawn to the mocha ice cream that Blower was pointing at. The mocha flavor is a green tea flavor. If you'd like a sweet and sour ice cream, you can go with the blueberry flavor. If you like a rich and sweet ice cream, the chocolate flavor would be the way to go. If you prefer something that's light and fragrant, vanilla would be the best choice. Yabimiya offered an introduction to help Anna make her decision. After accruing some experience in the past few days, she discovered that most little kids preferred the sweet and sour blueberry flavor or the super sweet chocolate flavor over the mocha flavor ice cream. I want the sweet and sour one. Anna pointed at the blueberry ice cream with an elated expression after hearing Yabimiya's introduction. All right, please get us a blueberry ice cream. Joshua turned to Yabimiya with a smile. Would you like to order anything else? Yabimiya asked. No, thanks. One ice cream will do. Joshua smiled as he closed the menu on the table in front of him. All right, please wait a moment. Yabimiya nodded as she turned toward the kitchen. Blower looked at Joshua's wrinkled face with complex emotions in his heart, at a loss for what to do. Anna was practically bouncing in her seat as she waited for her ice cream. Her gaze fell on Blower's untouched portion of Yangzhou fried rice, and she suddenly couldn't look away as her little stomach began to growl. She had only had a small breakfast, and was getting quite hungry. Even though there was a delicious ice cream arriving soon, she was still drawn to the delicious-looking rainbow fried rice. I seem to have ordered too much food. Anna, can you do me a favor? I haven't touched this portion of rainbow fried rice, can you eat it for me? Food is a blessing given to us by nature, and it's not good to waste food. Blower looked at Anna with a concerned expression. Grandpa, can I? Anna turned to Joshua with a pitiable expression. She had never seen such beautiful food before, and was salivating involuntarily. Blower also turned to Joshua with genuine benevolence in his eyes. All right, you have my thanks. Joshua looked at the expectant Anna, then at the genuine Blower, and finally made up his mind. He had lived for over 700 years, and travelled almost the entire Norland continent. He had seen everything there was to see, and had become a very good judge of character. At the very least, the eyes couldn't lie. One's nature could be gleaned through their eyes, and Blower's eyes were very pure and clear. Even among elves, there were very few with eyes as clean as his unless children were factored in. Blower still had residual magic elements which indicated that he was very powerful despite his young age on his body. His mannerism suggested that he hailed from a major family in the Wind Forest, but the benevolence he displayed toward Anna was not feigned. The Wind Forest was the elven homeland, and not all members of the major families were bad people. That was something that Joshua constantly reminded himself of. At the very least, the elven princess had helped him in the past. Otherwise, he would have been separated from Anna. Then, I guess I'll help you eat it. Anna was still a little wary as she looked at Blower. All right, thank you for your help, Anna. Blower offered the fried rice to Anna with a smile and handed her his spoon as well. "Thank you." Anna accepted the spoon, but her attention had been completely drawn to the fried rice placed in front of her. An alluring scent wafted through the air, making her stomach growl even more ferociously. She scooped a spoonful of fried rice into her mouth, and her eyes shimmered like stars. "It's so delicious!" Anna exclaimed with elation. She scooped up another spoonful of fried rice and offered it to Joshua. "Grandpa, you have a taste too, it's super delicious." "I'm not hungry, Anna, you should eat it. You can only grow big if you eat lots." Joshua shook his head with a smile. He had taken a look at the Yangzhou fried rice on the menu, and discovered that it cost 600 copper coins. He wasn't wealthy at all, so this was a very rare opportunity for Anna to taste such delicious and expensive food. "No. If Grandpa won't eat, then I won't eat, either." Anna shook her head stubbornly. Joshua looked at Anna's serious expression, and could only accept the spoonful of fried rice in a resigned manner. Anna was only a little girl, but she was very stubborn. If she set her mind on something, she would see it through to the end. "This flavor." Joshua's eyes immediately widened. The fried rice was incredibly delicious, but what was most surprising to him was that faint fragrant undertone. A memory that had been sealed away for decades suddenly sprang to life again. He was sure that he was tasting the flavor of the spring of life. Over 100 years ago, the Elven Queen had rewarded him, as well as a group of other elves who had made significant contributions in the war among species, with the cup of the spring of life. Even though it was only a small cup, the flavor was something he would never forget. He didn't think that he would taste it again in a restaurant in Chaos City. "Are you guys traveling the continent?" Blower asked with a smile. As Anna feasted on her fried rice, Sally slowly made her way toward them to eavesdrop on their conversation. She had never come into contact with elves living outside of the Wind Forest, and was very curious about their lives. At the same time, she wanted to verify what Blower had told her the night before. An interaction between the young master of a major elven family and two ordinary elves. "I wonder how this will play out." Mag was also looking at the three elves with a hint of curiosity. He had gathered a lot of information regarding the current state of the elven race, so he was quite familiar with their internal politics. He didn't want to rate their policies, as he couldn't change anything anyway. From what he had gathered, the elven race had indeed become more powerful and more united than the demons. However, many issues also arose as a result. For example, one of them was related to the questions about freedom that Sally had posed earlier in the morning. That was most likely the main issue that had been brought about by the new changes. "That's right. We've traveled many places on the Norland continent, and we plan on going to even more places." A genuine smile appeared on Joshua's weathered face. "That must be very interesting." Joshua's smile seemed to be quite infectious, and even Blower found himself smiling along with him. "We encounter all types of people and events during our travels. Not all of them are pleasant, but most of them are very interesting. Furthermore, there's a sense of freedom that you would only get from traveling. Even if we're just wandering aimlessly, it's still a very enjoyable endeavor," Joshua replied. "Freedom, eh?" A thoughtful expression appeared on Blower's face. "Even wandering aimlessly is more enjoyable than staying in the Wind Forest?" Sally was also deep in thought. She had never thought that she would hear something like that from a wandering elf, and it was quite a jarring blow to her. "Can you tell me about the interesting places that you've been to? Perhaps I'll also go on a journey in the future, but I prefer to have a set destination." Blower looked at Joshua with a smile. "It's good for young people to go out there and see the world." Joshua's smile widened upon hearing that. He paused momentarily to gather his thoughts before telling some stories about the places that he had traveled. He had fished in the glacial rivers of the undulating Anglo-Alps in the northwestern region of the Roth Empire, he had surfed around the Dragon Island, he had hunted for wild game in the Twilight Forest. Joshua told one story after another, and his coarse yet steady voice drew in the listeners, making them feel as if they were reliving those events through him. Not just Blower and Sally, but many of the nearby customers also began to listen to his stories. It was in the nature of all living beings to want to live within their comfort zone. As such, very few people could discard their past life and go on a journey. It was exactly because of this that everyone wanted to live vicariously through Joshua's stories. So their journey is not filled with incessant peril and hardships, most of it consists of beautiful scenery and wonderful experiences. Sally was going through a bout of mental upheaval. The ideals that had been drilled into her mind were slowly crumbling, and she began to accept the fact that the teachers and adults in the Wind Forest had lied to her. Blower's eyes glowed brighter and brighter as he listened to Joshua's stories, and he often inquired Joshua for additional details when he heard a story that particularly caught his fancy. A little elf. Amy sat behind the counter with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and her eyes glowed as she looked at Anna. It was the first time that an elven child had visited their restaurant, and she was very excited. However, she then looked down at herself, and a hint of hesitation appeared on her face. She wasn't the same as her, that little girl was a true elf, while she was only a half-elf. All other elves had golden hair, and only hers was silver. The disparity in their appearance made her a little depressed. I wonder what she's thinking. Poor child. Mag had also noticed that Amy was being uncharacteristically quiet. Under normal circumstances, she would definitely be making conversation with another child of her age. Despite Mag's best efforts to shield her from the prejudices of this world, she had still been impacted by the discrimination against half-breed beings. Mag couldn't think of any good way to resolve this issue in the short term, so he could only start by changing the minds of the restaurant's customers. Joshua was a wealth of experience and a naturally gifted storyteller. Listening to him talk struck everyone with a strong bout of wanderlust, and he soon drew the attention of everyone in the restaurant. Sally's conflicted expression had also been replaced with one of yearning. During her journey from the Wind Forest to Chaos City, she had been constantly worried about being discovered by her brethren, thereby preventing her from enjoying her travels. Thus, Joshua's stories showed her another facet of the world. He truly loves freedom and is living his happiest life. Sally looked at Joshua's beaming face, and suddenly discovered that she couldn't remember the last time she had seen such an elated smile in the Wind Forest. It seemed that no one smiled in the Wind Forest anymore, not even those who hailed from the wealthy and powerful major families. The elven servants were crippled by the weight of slavery and oppression, while those from the major families were burdened by the weight of their insatiable greed. As such, no one was truly happy. Yabimiya only brought out Anna's blueberry ice cream after she had finished the entire portion of Yongzhou fried rice. Anna held the ice cream carefully in her hands, and her little face was alight with elation. She looked at the two bluish-violet balls of ice cream, and hesitated momentarily before taking her first lick. A sweet and sour flavor melted on the tip of her tongue before spreading through her mouth. An expression of amazement appeared on Anna's face. She had never tasted food like this before. Even though it looked like a snowball, it was completely different from the snowballs created by molding the snow that fell from the sky. It's delicious. Anna was overjoyed. Her attention was entirely focused on the ice cream, and the smile on her little face gradually became even wider and more vibrant. What an adorable little girl! It must be very difficult taking care of her during your travels though, right? Blower thought to himself as he looked at Anna. Even though it was the first time he had met Joshua and Amy, the two of them left him with a very good impression. Their stories also vindicated his words, and he turned to gauge Sally's reaction. Sally's expression was rather conflicted. She could sense that Blower had turned to look at her, and she hesitated momentarily before asking, "Why won't you return to the Wind Forest? There, you can receive protection and avoid the perils and hardships of traveling. But braving the unknown is the most interesting element of a journey, is it not?" Joshua glanced at Sally before placing 2 gold coins onto the table. He then held onto Anna's little hand, and said, "Let's go." You can eat your ice cream as we walk. What a pity, I didn't get to greet that big sister. Amy wore a forlorn expression as she looked at the departing Anna and Joshua. What an adorable little girl. It's sad that they're so wary toward elves like us. Blower also wore a wistful expression as he turned toward Sally with a meaningful glance. He then also paid his bill, and left the restaurant. Sally was quite distraught as she looked on with hollow eyes. The beliefs that she had held all her life thus far were beginning to crumble. Was it really true that the Wind Forest had become an elven prison? Were the elves wandering the continent really happier than the elves in the Wind Forest? A series of questions appeared in Sally's mind, but they were all rhetorical as the answers were already apparent. Give all elves true freedom, the words that Blower had spoken the night before drifted through her mind. She recalled all those defeated, dejected faces, and then compared them to the smiling faces of Joshua and Anna. In that instant, a beam of light seemingly lit up in her mind, and she felt as if she suddenly knew what she should do next. About 5 kilometers outside of Chaos City in the northeastern direction, there was a small village. Within a large courtyard in the village, there were a few burly demons and orcs eating meat and drinking wine together. There was already no one left living in the village, but there was a wall 4 or 5 meters tall surrounding the large courtyard. There were also dozens of orc and demon guards patrolling the walls. Within the courtyard, an orc with a sinister saber wound on his face turned to a burly abyss demon, and asked, "Boss, we've caught quite a few piggies this month, they should fetch us quite a bit of money, right?" The other demons and orcs also turned to the abyss demon upon hearing that, all of them with greed shimmering in their eyes. If only that was the case. I just received news from them yesterday that the piggies we caught are too weak for their standards. From this month onward, they're going to pay based on the power level of the piggies. If we catch piggies below the 3rd tier, we may as well not hand them in, because we'll be getting next to nothing for them. Olaf slammed his bowl onto the table in an enraged manner. What? How could they do that? They can't just suddenly change the rules like this. In the past, they were willing to take piggies that don't even know magic. All of the piggies we've caught this month are really weak. There are less than 10 above the 3rd tier, and most of them are only at the 4th tier. These piggies are really good at running away as well, it's really hard to catch them in the forest. The demons and orcs were furious upon hearing this change in policy. Boss, I think we need to have an in-depth discussion with them about this matter. If they insist on doing things like this, then we'll be out of job soon. Those piggies will probably fetch more even if we sell them to Rodu or the Demon Islands, the orc from before grumbled. Exactly. We have to keep these piggies watered and fed, and prohibit our brothers from taking them for themselves. But what about now? If this is the price they're offering, then we might as well let our brothers have some fun with them before selling them off. A Minotaur demon's eyes were wide with rage. The other orcs and demons also concurred with this suggestion, and they all rose to their feet. You can do that if you all want to die. Don't forget about what happened to Krian's team last year. All of them were wiped out because one of them molested a piggy. Olaf looked at everyone with a cold expression. All of the demons and orcs immediately shuddered as if they had been doused with cold water. Olaf looked at everyone, and continued, "Remember, we're doing this for money. If the piggies dare to resist, it's okay for you to kill 1 or 2 of them. However, there are some things that we cannot do. You'd better watch yourselves, or even I won't be able to protect you. If you want women, you can pay for them in Chaos City once we get the money." Yes. The orcs and demons all bowed their heads respectfully in response. Olaf was the most powerful being among them at the 8th tier, and was also their squad leader. The 2 deputy squad leaders were only at the 7th tier, so his word was absolute. "Terry, Ebenezer, come with me." Olaf stood up and walked away, quickly followed by the 2 deputy squad leaders. Olaf led the 2 of them into a room, and closed the door before casting a soundproofing spell. He then turned to the Minotaur demons, and instructed, "Terry, make a trip to the Demon Islands and find out the piggy prices in the black market. Forge a new identity and sell off some piggies there if it's more profitable. Then, go to Rodu and do the same. Remember, don't let anyone discover your new identities. Hey! Terry's and Ebenezer's eyes widened in unison as they stared at Olaf with incredulity. Boss, didn't you say that we can't do these things? Terry was very perplexed. Olaf's warning had made him give up on dabbling in any shady business, but he was now being instructed to do the very thing that he had been warned against doing. The prices offered by the Wind Forest are way too low, we won't be able to make any profit from this batch of piggies, so we have to sell them off, then work on improving the quality of our future batches. Don't let any of our brothers hear about this, though. Those idiots have sh*t for brains. Piggies have to be cleaned to fetch a good price. If they end up mounting the piggies before we can sell them, their market value will drop significantly. Olaf pursed his lips in response. But what if the elves from the Wind Forest find out? Ebenezer was still quite concerned. That's why we need to keep this strictly confidential. Otherwise, all three of us will be hunted down and killed. Olaf also adopted a grave expression as he turned to Ebenezer, and said, I've already thought of a way out. We can't terminate our deal with the Wind Forest yet, as that would make what we're doing now too obvious. However, we need to improve our efficiency, so we have to start targeting more powerful piggies. Only they will fetch us worthwhile reimbursement from the Wind Forest. Come to think of it, there are quite a few powerful piggies here in Chaos City, but most of them have settled here permanently. If we try to capture them, our actions most likely won't be able to escape the notice of the City Lord's Castle and the Grey Temple. Ebenezer nodded in response. We can't touch anyone from Chaos City. The people from the Grey Temple are absolutely insane, we can't mess with them. We should target the piggies that have just arrived here from the Wind Forest. I received news yesterday that an old piggy and a young piggy have arrived recently, and the old one is likely to be over the 5th tier in terms of power level. Go and capture them. Olaf smiled coldly as he said, as long as we can offer up a few powerful piggies a month, the people from the Wind Forest won't suspect us of any foul play. Grandpa, this ice cream is super delicious. Can we stay here for a few more days? I want to have more ice cream. Anna walked along the street with her ice cream cone in her hand as she looked up at Joshua with an expectant gaze. Do you like ice cream that much? Joshua looked down at Anna with a smile. It was the first time he had seen Anna so enraptured by any food item. I do. It's the best thing I've tasted. Anna nodded earnestly. The sweet and sour flavor of the blueberry ice cream was extraordinary in her eyes. She couldn't comprehend how a snowball could pack the flavor of fruit and milk at the same time. All right, then we'll leave tomorrow. We can't stay in one place for too long. Who knows? Perhaps there will be more amazing food waiting for us at our next destination. Joshua nodded with a smile. Even though 200 copper coins per ice cream cone was quite expensive, it was still something that he could afford. After all, he was a 6th tier magic caster, and could mix some potions during their travels to cover their expenses. Of course, gold coins were most often useless when traveling in the wilderness. In such settings, wild fruits and dew were the ideal sources of sustenance for elves. What kind of background does this restaurant have? To think that they can use the spring of life in their dishes. That girl is most likely the young mistress of a major family, so why is she working as a waitress there? That young master appeared to be quite a good person. He has the same pure eyes as the elven princess. A string of thoughts flashed through Joshua's mind, but he quickly shook his head to rid himself of them. There was always an abundance of interesting people and things to encounter during a journey, but for a traveler like him, he would meet most people only once in his life, so there was no need to learn too much about them. Following the lunch service, Sally cleaned up the restaurant before departing under the guise of taking a walk. Mag didn't say anything about that. He could tell what emotions were running through Sally's heart, but he didn't know how to soothe her internal conflict. "Father, so many people greeted me at school today. They seem to all know me now." Amy looked up at Mag with an elated expression on her little face as she held Ugly Duckling in her arms. "You're the hero of Chaos School, so of course a lot of people know who you are now." Mag chuckled. Amy had well and truly made a name for herself through her heroic display. "Hee hee, I like beating up bad people. Beating up bad people makes a lot of good people happy." Amy smiled with elation. "Beating up bad people is a good thing, but you have to make sure that you don't bite off more than you can chew. If the baddies are too powerful, we have to learn to protect ourselves and challenge them only when we're strong enough to do so," Mag said with a smile. "I'll remember that." Amy nodded earnestly. "Good girl." Mag patted Amy's head with a smile. He looked at the smile on her little face, but the image in his mind was of the fearful look on the face of that little elf girl from earlier. Racial discrimination was a major problem on the Norland continent. Even though Chaos School and Chaos City had been doing their best to change this situation, the Chamber of Commerce was still implementing policies that encouraged such discrimination. He didn't know how many centuries would have to pass before this situation could be reversed. "Looks like I'll have to accelerate my steam engine plan. It won't be easy to change the world, so I'll start by changing the Chamber of Commerce first. If I can't change its president's mind about the rules encouraging discrimination against half-breed service staff, then I'll just have to replace him altogether. Either make the person in power implement the changes you would like to see, or overthrow that person and make up your own rules." That was a notion that had been instilled in Mag's mind by his father in his past life. "It's time to dig up more information about the Moreton family and the Chamber of Commerce," Mag thought to himself. Of course, he couldn't bring down such a colossus on his own, he needed suitable partners. That night, Mag went upstairs to check on the beer brewing machine, and found that it was operating smoothly. The next morning, 3 barrels of delicious beer would be ready. There were also alcoholic beverages in this world, and the one that was most similar to beer was barley wine. However, due to the brewing methods, the wine wasn't as refreshing nor as stimulating as beer, and its quality was obviously incomparable to that of the beer brewed by Mag, either. However, Mag was quite interested in the wine that had been around for several centuries in this world. After all, this was a magical world, and some races had extremely long lifespan. A 200-year-old barrel of wine could just be something that they left in a cellar during their younger days. "I wonder if they'll embrace the taste of beer," Mag thought to himself. It would be quite awkward if such a popular beverage in his past life were to be renounced in this world. Night fell, and all the lights were switched on in Mamie Restaurant. Customers rushed in and out of the restaurant in practically relentless surges, drawing much envy from other restaurant owners. The outdoor dining area was also completely full. Many customers who were concerned about having abnormal reactions to the restaurant's dishes chose to sit outside. The tables and chairs were all metallic, so they didn't have to worry about damaging the furniture. Dining outside is more romantic at night. Blower also arrived for the dinner service, and his eyes lit up at the sight of the lantern-lit outdoor dining area. Enjoying delicious food while basking in the balmy autumn breeze under the bright moon was a delightful combination. Coincidentally, a couple of customers were getting up to leave after paying their bills, so he went to sit down at that table. Sally cleaned up the table and took a glance at him, but didn't say anything as she went back into the restaurant. Blower didn't say anything, either. They had agreed on a rendezvous that night. He was very confident that Sally would be swayed by his point of view, particularly following their conversation with Joshua and Anna earlier in the day. "I'll get a young Joe fried rice, a sweet tofu pudding, and a mocha ice cream, served in that order." Blower sat down and stated his order to Yabimiya. "All right, please wait a moment." Yabimiya smiled in response before turning to make her way back into the restaurant. Boom! Right at that moment, a thunderous explosion erupted in the Aden Square. A ball of flames rose into the sky nearby, and the ground tremored slightly. "What's going on?" Many people turned in that direction. They were surprised that someone dared to cause an explosion in the Aden Square. Isn't it said that Chaos City has exceptional law enforcement forces? Who would dare to fight in the square? Blower was also rather confused. All of a sudden, his eyes widened, and he abruptly rose to his feet. The Aden Square was extremely vast in area, with many trees over 100 years old. The loud explosion erupted alongside powerful magic waves, immediately following which an elderly blood-stained figure rushed out of a forest with a child in his arms. His footsteps were quite labored, but he showed no intention of stopping. Behind him was a burly six-armed snake demon. He was holding all types of weapons in his 6 hands, and his black serpentine lower body slithered forward with astonishing speed. Just a casual flick of his tail could fell a large tree. Behind the 6-armed snake demon were 4 or 5 demons and orcs closing in a semicircle formation. All of them were moving extremely quickly, and were rapidly gaining on their prey. The sinister smiles on their faces were apparent for all to see. It's Joshua and Anna. Blower's eyes were filled with shock as he looked at the 2 fleeing elves. His gaze fell on the gaping hole in Joshua's chest, and his expression immediately darkened. That was a grievous wound that would most likely kill him. Why would these demons and orcs chase down this pair of harmless elves? A green wand appeared in his hand, and green light shimmered on its tip. Such powerful magic waves! Sally was rather surprised as she looked at Blower. Her gaze then fell on Joshua and Anna, upon which her expression immediately changed. She hurriedly put down the serving platter in her hands, and rushed out of the restaurant. "Save us, big brother!" Anna's little face was pale with fear, but a hint of hope lit up in her eyes as she caught sight of Blower. Joshua also turned to Blower with a hopeful expression. He stomped violently into the ground and abruptly changed his direction, rushing toward Mamie restaurant while leaving a trail of blood in his wake. "Rise, wooden forest wall!" Blower pointed his wand behind Joshua, and a green light flashed through the air. Immediately thereafter, a green wooden wall 3 meters tall and 5 meters wide instantly appeared behind Joshua. The spells and projectiles unleashed by the pursuing demons all crashed into the wooden wall, making it tremor violently. After withstanding a powerful spell from the 6-armed snake demon, it was finally at its limits, and exploded into specks of green light. "Who are you? Why are you hunting down my elven brethren?" By that time, Blower had already arrived beside Joshua and Anna. He lent his arm to Joshua for support, and appraised the demons and orcs with a frosty expression. All of the restaurant's customers looked on with curiosity in their eyes. Some of them recognized Joshua and Anna as the pair of elven travelers that had dined here earlier in the day. A hint of sympathy welled up in their hearts upon making that realization. They were wondering how the 2 of them had irked that group of terrifying demons. What a nosy bastard! This piggy is male, but he's even better looking than females. If we capture him, we'll be sure to sell him for a good price. He's quite powerful, though, so we might not be able to catch him. We can't cause too much of a commotion in Chaos City, but at the very least, we have to kill that old piggy. Otherwise, we could get exposed. Ebenezer stopped in his tracks, and glared coldly at Blower before turning to Joshua with a furious expression. "That old bastard stole from me and killed 2 of my brothers. I have to capture him to avenge my fallen brothers. Do you think you can fool me with that story?" Blower's expression turned even colder upon hearing that. He turned to Sally, and said, "Save him." Sally was initially at a loss for what to do, but Blower's instruction suddenly gave her direction. She immediately strode forward to the deathly pale Joshua, who was too feeble to even speak. She helped him lie down on the ground as green light appeared on her fingertips. She then pressed her hands gently over the wound on his chest, upon which the wound began to heal. However, her expression only became graver despite that. Joshua was extremely severely wounded, and he had most likely used a spell that burned his life force. He was already close to reaching the end of his lifespan, and what little remaining life force he had was like a dying candle flickering in the breeze. Even if she had some milk of life on hand, it wouldn't be able to save him. Grandpa! Grandpa! You have to stay awake. I'm scared, Grandpa, I can't live without you. Anna was sobbing uncontrollably as she knelt next to Joshua, clenching his wrinkled hand tightly with her two little hands. Ebenezer was rather taken aback at the sight of Sally. She was a very beautiful and powerful elf, but she appeared to be working as a waitress. Perhaps he could bring along more brothers next time to capture her, she would definitely sell for a good price. He took a glance at Joshua, who appeared to be slowly recovering, and he yelled at Blower, "Don't stick your nose in other people's business, little brat. These two have stolen from me, we have evidence. Even if people from the Grey Temple were to come here, they would take our side. You're telling me an old elf would take his granddaughter with him to steal from a bunch of demons and orcs? Can't you at least fabricate a more convincing story? You're not getting your hands on them today." Blower's expression cooled even further upon hearing Anna's distraught sobs. He could already guess what had happened. "All right, you're quite an arrogant little bastard, aren't you? Let me see if a pretty piggy like you can back up your big mouth." Ebenezer raised three of his arms in unison, and commanded, "Capture them." The demons and orcs surrounding the restaurant's entrance in a semicircle immediately pounced toward Blower and the others. Ebenezer began to chant a complex spell, and black light materialized on his 6 arms. The restaurant's customers all had their attention drawn to the events unfolding outside. They were quite sympathetic toward Joshua and Anna, but also quite concerned that Blower was facing off against such a powerful group of demons and orcs. Yabimiya stood off to the side with a concerned expression. She wanted to help and save Joshua, but was afraid that she would get in Sally's way, so she could only hold her platter as a shield and stand in front of them. "I feel so sorry for that old man. Should we go and help him?" At the entrance of the magic potion shop, Zixi was looking at Joshua with a sympathetic expression. "But they're elves, if we get exposed." Lulu grabbed onto Zixi's wrist and shook his head with a worrisome expression. "Lulu, if it weren't for young Mistress Sally, we'd already be dead by now. The elves had nothing to do with the fall of our race." Zixi turned back to Lulu with a serious expression. "Let's go, then. I'll help fight those bastards off." Lulu finally made his decision after a brief hesitation. He stepped forward and threw himself at a burly bear demon. Right at that moment, a mellow voice sounded from the restaurant entrance. "How dare you baddies bully these good people? Eat my ice fire bomb!" The ice fire bomb glided above everyone's heads, leaving a streak of red and white water vapor in its wake as it hurtled toward Ebenezer. "Ha, little brat!" Ebenezer pursed his lips with disdain as one of his arms swung a mace toward the ice fire bomb. Most of his attention was focused on Blower and the burly bear charging toward him. The bear that had sprung up out of nowhere was quite powerful, and was a 7th-tier magic caster just as Blower was. Ebenezer was the only 7th-tier being in his party, so he had to end the battle as quickly as possible before taking care of that old elf. Boom! The ice fire bomb exploded upon making contact with the mace, and in the instant that ice and fire merged together, an enormous amount of power exploded forth, radiating outward in all directions. Ebenezer initially hadn't taken the attack very seriously, but his expression immediately changed upon seeing that. He instantly created 2 magic shields in front of himself, barely protecting himself from the red and white shock waves that way. Even so, the shields that he had materialized tremored violently as a result, and were almost destroyed. How could this little brat be so powerful? Ebenezer looked at the wand-wielding Amy with incredulity in his eyes. He had thought that she had merely unleashed a fireball spell that could be swept aside with ease, but who would have thought that the spell would be as powerful as one unleashed by a 4th-tier magic caster? If the spell were to strike him in a completely defenseless state, he wasn't sure if even his robust scales could keep him unscathed. "If I capture this little brat, the Wind Forest should be willing to pay a super high price for her, right?" A cold light flashed through Ebenezer's eyes as that thought occurred to him. The Wind Forest would definitely be interested in a super prodigy like her. This was a massive business opportunity. Amy is so powerful. All of the customers were stunned by Amy's amazing display. Many of them were initially quite skeptical about the news that she had defeated a 4th-tier magic caster. However, all of those suspicions had been wiped away upon seeing her in action. A 4-year-old 4th-tier magic caster, she was a prospect that could make the entire magic world go insane. No. The entire Norland continent would go insane for her. Call for reinforcements. Ebenezer turned to the orc beside him with a grim expression. With 3 7th-tier magic casters and such an extraordinarily prodigious little girl present, the situation was no longer something that their party could take care of. He didn't know when the people from the Grey Temple were going to arrive, but he had to silence that old elf before they could get here. This old fart had somehow managed to discover the location where they held their piggies captive, and voluntarily sought them out. In the process of trying to free his brethren, he had even wounded 2 of their brothers who were guarding the location. Thus, he led a group of brothers to chase him down, thinking that an elderly 6th-tier magic caster would be easy prey. However, he somehow managed to escape all the way to Chaos City, and just when they were about to capture him, these nosy bastards intervened. If he were to disclose the location of their base, then they would have to flee, thereby leaving behind a base that they had spent several years constructing and enhancing. If the attention of the Grey Temple were drawn to their dealings, they wouldn't be able to continue hunting for piggies near Chaos City, either. In any case, if that old elf were allowed to live, it would spell disaster for him and his brothers. And what was more important than riches, all of them received cultivation resources from the Wind Forest every year. Even something that valuable as the Spring of Life was not out of the equation, and those resources were worth risking their lives for. That old elf's fate was sealed. One of the spells that he had unleashed had punctured the elf's heart, so it was already quite surprising that he was able to escape all the way to Chaos City while carrying that little piggy. His top priority now was to kill him before he disclosed any information about them. Yes. The orc retreated a few steps before producing a small box from a pocket. He opened the box, and 3 black moths flew out from within, quickly disappearing into the darkness. The demons and orcs were already engaged in battle with Lulu, who had transformed into a huge bear. Lulu was clearly more powerful than them, but they had an advantage in numbers, so it was difficult to determine who would come out on top in the end. Ebenezer looked at Blower, and his massive serpentine tail writhed as he tried to think of a way to bypass Blower's annoying wood-type magic. If he wanted to land the killing blow on that old elf, it seemed that he had no choice but to crash through Blower's defenses. Mag had also come to the restaurant's entrance. He stood beside Amy and looked at Joshua and Anna with sympathy in his eyes. "Father, that big sister is so miserable. Can we help them?" Amy asked. "That big brother, Aisha, and Lulu are already helping them, so we don't need to do anything for now. Otherwise, we might end up getting in their way instead." Mag shook his head in response. With Blower, Sally, and Lulu present, that was already a formidable force consisting of 3 7th-tier beings. They were already enough to handle the situation. What was imperative now was whether they could save the severely wounded Joshua. "All right." Amy nodded with a thoughtful expression as she murmured to herself, "I'll only help them if they can't win." "Grandpa! Grandpa, wake up! I can't live without you." Anna gently swung Joshua's arm from side to side as tears flowed down her face. "Let me help you." Zixi quickly strode over to Sally before squatting down, and a green seedling appeared in her hand. The seedling already had 5 tender green leaves, and a 3rd branch had appeared. Wisps of green light fell upon Joshua from the seedling, enveloping his entire body within. The bleeding had already stopped, and the wound had already fully healed, but Joshua's life force was still quickly fading away. Zixi took a glance at Anna with a heavy heart. She gently stroked Anna's hair, wondering if she would get a chance to bid farewell to her grandpa. Joshua felt as if his soul had left his body. He had seemingly arrived in a strange space, following which he saw his own life, which had spanned 800 years. He was born in the Wind Forest and lived there through his childhood and his youth. At that time, trees that were millennia old were quite common in the Wind Forest. Elves frolicked and played with birds and animals in the forest. They ate wild fruits for sustenance and lived on the trees. Time passed by slowly, and every day was spent in leisure and comfort. There was no concept of money or hierarchy, only freedom. Every elf treated the others as their equals and lived on friendly terms. And then, the orcs and demons came. They used their evil magic and weapons to sweep through the forest, slaughtering elves with reckless abandon, felling massive trees that were thousands of years old, and transporting hordes of elves to all corners of the continent in cages to be sold off as slaves. The elven race had been reduced to a pack of vulnerable sheep, ravaged and stomped on by the demons and orcs as they pleased. The peace and serenity of the Wind Forest were destroyed. Devastating wars erupted, and the demons and orcs left a trail of bleak nothingness in their wake, heralding the fall of the elven race. Some elves tried to flee the Wind Forest, but the world outside the forest was also in utter chaos. The entire Norland continent had been swept into a massive war that no race could detach itself from. At the height of the elven race's crisis, the elven queen and high priestess Helena arrived like God-sent saviors. They had extraordinary combat and military prowess, and they always led the troops in the very front in every single battle. The elves rallied under them, and were able to prevent the orcs and demons from encroaching upon the elven Holy Land, receiving the approval of the Tree of Life in the process. At that time, the elven queen became the goddess of all elves, and was revered like a deity. At the same time, High Priestess Helena's contributions were also not to be overlooked. Aside from her powerful star magic, her greatest contribution was that she instilled courage and confidence into the hearts of her brethren when fear and despair were running rampant among them. She encouraged all elves to become warriors in order to protect the Wind Forest. She urged them to pick up bows and arrows, as well as wands, to ward off the invaders. Joshua had also become one of those warriors who fought to protect the Wind Forest. He had slain orcs and demons, and had also been wounded in battle before. However, even in the most desperate of times, he could always find warmth in his own brethren. He fought under the Queen's commands, and it always felt as if hope and victory were lying just ahead. This epic war among species finally drew to a conclusion after a century. The elven race had suffered extremely severe losses, but they were also able to make most of the orc and demon invaders stay in the Wind Forest forever. On that day, Mistress Helena signed the peace treaty with all of the other races in Chaos City. The elven race had full legal ownership of the Wind Forest. A celebration lasting half a month ensued when the elves heard this news. They could live free and leisurely lives in the Wind Forest again. Or at least, that was what Joshua and his fellow elven warriors had thought. After that, High Priestess Helena returned to the Wind Forest, and began to issue rewards in the form of riches and land to the elves who had made contributions in the war among species. No one had any objections to this. The elves that were rewarded deserved everything that they received. However, at the time, Joshua could sense that something was off. Back then, there were no gold coins or official occupations in the elven race. Everyone was equal, and no one had any territory, so all elves had free passage rights anywhere in the Wind Forest. After contemplating the offer for 3 days, he turned down the rewards promised to him by High Priestess Helena, and chose to leave the Wind Forest just as many other elves had. They began to travel the continent, leaving behind the place that was filled with memories of the war. Back then, the war among species had just concluded, and all of the races on the Norland continent were recovering from its aftermath. Aside from the demon and orc territories, which were off-limits, he could travel virtually anywhere else without fear of danger. Thus, the wandering elves slowly began to forget about the war, and began their new lives. Joshua's heart also began to gradually heal during his travels. He made many acquaintances and friends, some of whom were also wandering elves. At times, he would travel with them for a stretch, and he lived a carefree life. However, all of that changed over 20 years ago. A bunch of hunting parties consisting of demons and orcs suddenly appeared on the Norland continent, and the prey they targeted was none other than wandering elves like him. Many elves were captured and thrown into cramped cages before being forced into dark underground cellars. Darkness seemed to have descended once again, and all of the elves were petrified. Some elves returned to the Wind Forest for protection, only to be held captive there and prohibited from leaving again. Elves no longer had the right to leave the forest as they pleased, while the major families had taken ownership of the entire elven race. More and more elves began to mysteriously disappear, following which more and more elven servants began to appear in the major families of the Wind Forest. They had been branded with magic seals, thereby preventing them from leaving their respective territory. Joshua discovered this 20 years ago. At the time, he had gone to visit a friend, only to find that their home was in ruins. He discovered a string of text carved onto a rock, stating that the couple had been captured by demons and orcs. After that, he encountered an elf who had only just escaped not long ago from the Wind Forest. He told Joshua that he had seen that couple in one of the major families, but the male elf was missing a leg, and had been reduced to the lowliest of servants. That had dealt a massive blow to Joshua. Following the conclusion of the war among species, the biggest threat posed to the elven race wasn't from other races, but the newly ascended nobles in the Wind Forest instead. The nobles of the elven race, what a laughable yet pitiful existence. He couldn't understand how those elves could be so cruel, nor how they could do such things to the elves whom they had battled alongside and had given everything they had to protect the Wind Forest. But what could he do? If he returned to the Wind Forest of his own accord, he would also lose his freedom. Thus, the wandering elves continued to travel the continent like startled birds. They clung on stubbornly to their freedom, which could be stripped from them at any moment. More and more elves began to disappear. At the same time, more and more demon and orc hunting parties appeared. That situation lasted until 6 years ago. That year, Princess Irina left the Wind Forest and began to travel the continent, only for one of those hunting parties to set their sights on her. The result was that the entire hunting party was demolished. Furthermore, that was only the beginning. One hunting party after another was vanquished by the elven princess. The roles of the hunter and the prey were reversed, and the arrogant hunting parties became the ones that had to run for their lives. To the wandering elves, Princess Irina was their savior, just as their queen had been during the Dark Ages. She destroyed countless hunting parties, rescued hordes of imprisoned elves, and was revered fanatically by the wandering elves. Around half of all of the hunting parties were destroyed by Princess Irina, and the remaining half disbanded. No one dared to capture elves anymore, and freedom was restored. The first time Joshua saw Princess Irina was 5 years ago. At the time, he had been severely wounded in a battle while assisting an elven couple in their escape from a group of demons. Right as he was plunged into the depths of despair, Princess Irina descended along with a man wielding a claymore, and they destroyed all of the demons with ease. However, that couple had already been slain during their attempt to protect their daughter, leaving behind a little elf girl who was less than a year old. Irina healed him before entrusting him with that child. She named the child Anna, and asked him to look after her. Princess Irina returned to the Wind Forest 3 years ago, and no news about her had been heard since then. The disbanded hunting parties began to hunt down elves again, thus plunging all of the wandering elves into another nightmare. Joshua had traveled to many places with Anna. He tried his best to teach her to become a free and kind-hearted elf, and she was his only hope. For her sake, he was willing to give up everything, including his life. Grandpa! Grandpa! Joshua's soul was just about to dissipate when he heard a series of heart-wrenching sobs. Anna! Joshua forced his eyes open, and slowly placed his right hand on Anna's cheek as he said, "Don't cry." "Father," he woke up. Amy was elated. She patted her little head and heaved a sigh of relief. Mag and the customers also heaved a collective sigh of relief. Sally and Zixi were both magic casters extremely skilled in the art of healing. With them present, even the most grievously wounded being could be saved. A hint of color had returned to Joshua's face, but Zixi was looking at him with a complex expression as she withdrew her hand. As she did so, the world tree seedling disappeared in her palm with a flash of green light. Sally's lips quivered as she also withdrew her hand with an indignant expression. She had already done her best, but Joshua was already close to the end of his natural lifespan, and had burned through all of his remaining life force. This was merely a brief revival before his life came to an end. A joyful expression also appeared on Blower's face, but his heart immediately sank at the sight of Zixi and Sally's expressions. It appeared that the worst-case scenario had still eventuated. He looked at the overjoyed smile on Anna's face, and his heart was filled with sympathy. "Grandpa! You're finally awake. I thought you were abandoning me." Anna pressed Joshua's large hand tightly against her face and sobbed with elation. "That old bastard's still not dead." Ebenezer turned to Joshua, and a cold light flashed through his eyes. He swung his uppermost pair of arms through the air, and two black magic balls whistled toward Joshua. At the same time, he whipped his huge serpentine tail and charged toward the restaurant's entrance while brandishing his other 4 weapons. "You should be the one to die." Blower glowered at Ebenezer as he swung his wand through the air. A green barrier of light appeared in front of him, standing in the way of the 2 black magic balls. A dull thump erupted, upon which both the barrier and the magic balls were destroyed at the same time. Vines as thick as a human arm then began to erupt from the ground to bind Ebenezer. At the same time, a series of wooden walls about 3 or 4 meters tall appeared, cutting off Ebenezer's path forward. "Anna, I'm going to go to a very faraway place. I won't be able to look after you anymore, but I hope you can be strong and harbor no hatred or resentment in your heart. You must become a free and kind-hearted elf." Joshua gently caressed Anna's cheek with a smile on his face. "Where are you going, Grandpa? Please take me with you, I'm scared." Anna sobbed as she stared at Joshua with a fearful expression. "I won't be able to take you with me this time." Joshua shook his head as he pointed up at the sky, and said, "High Priestess Helena once said that elves are destined to return to the Sea of Stars at the end of our lives. Our souls will rise into the sky and become a star in the night sky. If you miss me, then look up into the sky. I'll be constantly watching over you from up there." "No. I don't want Grandpa to become a star, I want you to stay with me forever." Anna shook her head as tears flowed down her face in a pitiable display. "Father, is he going to rise into the sky just like Mother has?" Amy asked. "It's not the same thing. Your mother is only living on the moon for now. One day, we're going to get her down from there." Mag shook his head as he patted Amy's little head. He looked at Joshua and his heart felt very heavy. If he and Amy were to encounter such peril, he would definitely also do everything he could to ensure Amy's survival, but what would become of Amy if he were to die? Would he have to bid farewell to her in such a heartbreaking manner as well? Sally also wore a grief-stricken expression on her face. It was her first time encountering a pair of wandering elves, but she didn't think that she would be witnessing the death of one of them after just half a day. In that moment, life suddenly seemed so fragile. The customers were initially quite relieved to see Joshua's revival, but they all wore sympathetic expressions upon seeing the direction that the events were unfolding in. "Silly child, Grandpa is too old, and must leave you now. I am extremely proud to have had such an adorable granddaughter like you." Joshua gave a resigned smile, but his eyes were also filled with concern and an unwillingness to part with Anna. He turned his head with difficulty to face Blower, and then continued, "Young Master Blower, can I ask you to do me a favor?" Blower turned to face Joshua and nodded as he said, "I'll do my best. Anna's parents have already passed away, and I'm also going to die now. Can you please take care of Anna in my stead?" Joshua pleaded earnestly. "Grandpa, I only want to stay by your side. I don't want anyone else. Please don't go," Anna sobbed as she hugged Joshua's arm and shook her head stubbornly. Poor child. Zixi glanced at Anna with a sympathetic expression before transforming into a white cat and charging toward Lulu. A green line connected the two of them, and she said in the Dryad tongue, "Lulu, stop him." Lulu was initially locked in an impasse against the demons and orcs, but his strength was suddenly significantly enhanced. He swept aside an orc with a single slap before slamming a demon's head into the ground with a powerful punch. He shook off the two demons behind him before throwing himself at Ebenezer. He sprang into the air and caught Ebenezer in an aggressive bear hug. The two of them were tangled up and fell to the ground as a result, where they grappled for dominance over the other. The vines that were sweeping toward Ebenezer changed directions to target the other orcs and demons, preventing them from getting any closer. Blower was silent for a moment as he looked into Joshua's eyes. His gaze then fell on the sobbing Anna. There were tears smeared all over her little face, and her eyes were swollen from crying. Her adorable smiling face back when she was having ice cream earlier in the day still remained in his mind, but only half a day had passed, and she had been reduced to such a pitiable state. Blower was silent for a long while before turning to Joshua again. He nodded solemnly, and said, "I'll look after her and teach her to become a free and kind-hearted elf." "Thank you." A smile appeared on Joshua's face. He clenched tightly onto Anna's little hand with his large wrinkled hand, and cast his gaze toward Lulu and Ebenezer as he asked, "Do you two know why we're being hunted down?" "At the very least, I don't believe he's telling the truth." Blower shook his head in response. Sally opened her mouth, but remained silent. However, Joshua had said "you two" rather than "you," so she knew that he was speaking to both Blower and herself. They're part of a hunting party specializing in capturing wandering elves. All of the elves they've captured are being held 5 kilometers to the north of Chaos City. They're going to be transported to the Wind Forest, where they would become slaves of the major families or warriors defending the borders of the Wind Forest. Elves who resist will be crippled or killed in battle. An ironic smile appeared on Joshua's face as he said with his final breath, "The war among species is over, yet the demons and orcs are still ravaging us elves. But this time, the masterminds are those in the Wind Forest." How ironic! Joshua's hand fell limply at his side, yet his wistful eyes were still locked on Anna. "Grandpa," Anna threw herself onto Joshua's chest. Her little body was racked by sobs. How could this be?" Sally took a couple of steps backward as all color drained from her face. Joshua's final words had dealt a heavy blow to her, and she felt as if she had been struck by lightning. The ironic smile on Joshua's face further compounded this effect. She suddenly understood where the elven servants owned by her family had come from. All of them barely ever talked, and some of them carried disabilities. They never talked about their past, and their eyes were seemingly always blank and dead. Once free elves, they had been captured and brought back to the Wind Forest in the most brutal manner by the brethren they had once protected. They were like shackled animals, and their souls were most likely already dead. The ideals that Sally had formed during her 20 years of education as the young mistress of a major family completely crumbled. The policies that she had once striven to protect suddenly appeared to be nothing more than a pitiful joke, and she realized just how cruel her vision to bring all wandering elves back to the Wind Forest truly was. Orcs and demons were still hunting down elves, but the masterminds were the noble elves in the Wind Forest. How many more elves had to be hurt and captured before this came to an end? Was the Wind Forest destined to become a massive cage? Anna's broken sobs resonated within Sally's mind, and her breathing suddenly accelerated as a burst of fury was ignited in her heart. "All you bastards should die!" Sally's gaze fell on the demons and orcs that had been bound by vines. Blue light flashed from the blue ring on her right index finger, and a silver bow appeared in her hands. At the same time, a quiver full of arrows appeared behind her back. She drew one of those arrows and knocked it on the bowstring before taking aim at a demon. There were 2 intertwining ripples of shimmering blue light around the arrow, and it shot through the air. "No!" The demon let loose a shrill cry of despair. He wanted to evade, but the vines around his body instantly contracted to bind its legs together. Splat! The sound of flesh being punctured erupted alongside a howl of anguish. The arrow instantly pierced through the demon's head, sending a pillar of blood gushing through the air. As the demon slumped lifelessly to the ground, a second arrow had already been shot and buried itself into an orc's heart. Whoosh! 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 One arrow shot forth after another, harvesting the lives of the bound demons and orcs. The speed and accuracy of her marksmanship were truly astounding. Big sister Aisha is so cool. I also want to learn archery. Amy's little mouth was slightly agape as she looked at Sally's exemplary marksmanship. Mag was also quite surprised. He had thought that Sally was only a 7th tier magic caster, he didn't think that her archery skills would be so impressive as well. Who would have thought that Madame Aisha's archery would be so terrifying? As expected, everyone from Mamie Restaurant is extraordinary in their own way. All of the customers' eyes widened upon seeing this. They had thought that Sally was quite haughty and aloof, but they now knew that her attitude was completely justified. I'll be sure to look after her. Blower knelt down beside Joshua and gently brushed his eyelids shut. He looked at the sobbing Anna in silence for a moment before standing up again. He turned to appraise Ebenezer, who was still locked in combat with Lulu, and a hint of killing intent flashed through his eyes. Countless vines erupted from the ground, intertwining to form a massive hand around 5 or 6 meters tall before slamming down on Ebenezer. After taking care of all of the bound demons and orcs, Sally knocked 3 arrows at once and aimed all of them at Ebenezer. A hint of panic appeared in Ebenezer's eyes upon seeing this. Just Lulu alone was proving to be quite a handful, and he was now being targeted by 2 7th tier magic casters as well. All of his subordinates had fallen, the scent of blood was wafting through the air, striking him with a sense of impending doom. Fall back! Zixi yelled. Lulu slammed Ebenezer into the ground before lunging off to the side. The massive green hand came crashing down violently, while the 3 arrows shot forth in a single line. No! Ebenezer was almost knocked out by Lulu's violent attack, but still he let loose a loud roar as he manifested a series of magic shields around himself. At the same time, he swung his weapons through the air to ward off the oncoming attacks, but his eyes were filled with despair. He knew that there was no way he would be able to survive this combination attack. The 3 arrows pierced through the magic shields, and the first 2 snapped during the process, but the final one was heading straight for Ebenezer's glabella. The massive green hand had also descended with a sharp spike about half a meter in length protruding from the palm. Dark green light was shimmering on the tip of the spike. Off to the side, Lulu was hunched over, ready to pounce and land the killing blow at any moment should that be required. However, Ebenezer was surely already dead. At least, that was what everyone thought. Right at that moment, the ground suddenly began to tremor. A massive boar close to 2 meters in height crashed through the forest like a heavy tank en route to Lulu. At the same time, a round ball-shaped figure emerged before crashing down heavily in front of Ebenezer. He stuck out a fat hand and caught the arrow that was hurtling toward Ebenezer's glabella, and then raised a massive black shield with his other hand to ward off the oncoming green hand. Lulu was sent flying for close to 20 meters by the charging boar before tumbling to the ground. His chest had caved in slightly, and many of his ribs had been broken. However, he still struggled to his feet, and appraised the massive boar with a grim expression. The rapidly spinning arrow was caught by the massive hand, and couldn't advance even a single inch further. Following a brief impasse, it shattered into specks of sawdust. The massive green hand struck the black shield, creating a muffled thump. The sharp spike at the center of the palm was snapped during the clash before the hand exploded. All of the intertwining vines were severed into countless segments before falling like green rain. Come on now, is it really fair for so many of you little bastards to bully my brother like this? The shield was slowly put down to reveal a fat black demon in the shape of a ball standing next to Ebenezer. Boss! Ebenezer looked at Olaf with unbridled elation in his eyes. He had resigned himself to death, but he had been saved. He glanced at Sally and Blower before whispering to Olaf, "The old bastard's dead, but those two know the location of our base now." The fat black demon was able to easily rescue Ebenezer from a fate of certain death. He was able to handle the most powerful attacks unleashed by two 7th-tier beings with ease, thereby clearly indicating that he was more powerful than anyone else present on the scene. Thus, all of the spectating customers were becoming a little nervous. Joshua's tragic death had left the adorable little elf girl with no relatives left in this world. Thus, everyone naturally sided with Blower and the others. However, in the face of such a powerful enemy, their chances of victory had diminished significantly. An 8th-tier being? I didn't think this hunting party would have such a powerful leader. Mag was also rather surprised as he looked at the Abyss Demon. It was the first time that he had heard about hunting parties capturing elves. This presented a reminder to him that he had to make sure to escort Amy to and from school every day. Even though Amy was only a half-elf, there was no telling what these demented bastards were capable of. As such, it was imperative that he addressed potential underlying threats. Furthermore, the enemies were clearly extremely powerful. Most of them consisted of 5th-tier or 6th-tier demons and orcs, with a couple of 7th-tier demons and even an 8th-tier leader. Grave expressions appeared on the faces of Blower and the others. They could determine from that attack that this demon was at least an 8th-tier being. An 8th-tier abyss demon with a 7th-tier porcupine battle boar and a 6-armed snake demon presented a very threatening lineup, even though they had 4 7th-tier beings on their side. However, Blower and Sally showed no intention of backing down. There were so many of their brethren still being held captive by this demon, and countless more had most likely died by his hands. Those crimes were unforgivable. They had to bring him down at all costs, even if it meant giving up their lives. "Did you say the same thing when you were ganging up on and capturing our brethren?" Blower retorted coldly. His hands were clenched tightly, and there was an extremely frosty look on his handsome face. The arrow knocked on the bow and Sally's hand was also pointing directly at Olaf, but she didn't launch an attack rashly. The fact that Olaf was able to catch her arrow with his bare hand clearly indicated that her arrows were ineffective against him. Besides, he also had that massive shield, which possessed even more superior defensive properties. Lulu's injuries were quickly recovering from Zixie's treatment. Following the revival of the World Tree, Zixie's healing abilities had clearly become more powerful. Furthermore, their healing abilities were further amplified when used on each other, so his injuries were not a cause for concern. However, Lulu's expression was very serious and grave as he looked at the massive boar before him. In open terrain, boars posed even more of a threat than tigers. The enormous force they were capable of generating while charging meant that even a graze could result in severe injuries. The porcupine battle boars were magic steeds that the abyss demons specialized in breeding. They were extremely wild and violent, and could unleash even more terrifying power in their berserk state than what they were otherwise capable of. Even though a 7th-tier porcupine battle boar like this one wasn't very intelligent, it was still an exceedingly difficult opponent to handle. "What a huge pig! Father, can we have roast pork this time as well?" Amy's eyes were alight with elation and anticipation as she looked at the porcupine battle boar. "That might be a little difficult." Mag looked at the boar with an awkward expression. The beast was over 2 meters tall and over 5 meters in length. It looked like a heavy tank, and it was really difficult to imagine how he would be able to roast a boar of this size. "All right, then. This pig is the same as that Uncle Hedgehog's pig, right? I feel like this pig isn't as big as Uncle Hedgehog's, though." Amy was a little disappointed, but her curiosity soon got the better of her again. "You're right." Mag nodded in response. During the recently concluded conference between the dragons and the demons, there was an abyss demon among the demon representatives. His steed had also been a porcupine battle boar. But this pig and that man who looks like a pig appear to be baddies. If Big Sister Aisha and Big Sister Zixie can't beat them, then I'll have to step up, Amy murmured to herself as she clenched her wand tightly in her hand. I've heard the very same words from many other elves, so I tried it for myself today, but it doesn't seem to work very well. It's a pity that none of them had the power to resist. All of them either bowed down to me or were killed. I'm not the same, though. All of you want to kill me, but which one of you is capable of bringing me down? Olaf chortled as he looked at Blower. All of a sudden, his smile faded, and he stepped forward with a cold expression as he said, "The two of you have heard things that you shouldn't have listened to. Hence, you have two options now, surrender or die." Everyone fell silent upon hearing that. After witnessing Olaf's immense power, no one dared to step up to try and protect Blower and the others. At the same time, people began looking around, searching for traces of personnel from the Grey Temple. At times like this, only the Grey Temple could take care of the situation. However, their search proved to be a fruitless one, and everyone wondered if the law enforcers of the Grey Temple would arrive in time. Surrender? I, Blower, don't intend to surrender to anyone, much less a demon. Blower chuckled coldly. He raised his hands high above his head, and chanted, "Wood elves of this world, heed my call. Rise up, wood monsters." The trees in the Aiden Square instantly began to rustle as flashes of green light emerged before converging together. Slowly, one green giant after another took shape, and all were over 4 meters tall. There were about a dozen of them in total, and all of them were holding green staves as they surrounded Olaf and his subordinates. High-level water forbidden spell, extreme freeze. Sally had put away her bow, and was brandishing her wand instead. She pointed the wand toward Olaf and the others, and a bone-chilling wind swept through the air. The ground upon which Olaf and Ebenezer stood was instantly covered by a layer of white frost. The frost then began to creep up their legs as if it were trying to freeze them solid. Lulu's chest injury had also almost fully recovered, and he threw himself at the porcupine battle boar, displaying speed and agility that belied his massive frame. "If you won't surrender, then you can go die." Olaf raised one hand, and blades around 1/2 meter in length immediately appeared around the edge of his shield. He hurled the shield toward the tree monsters, and it flew forth like a massive lethal frisbee, slicing through the necks of the tree monsters. The huge tree monsters were instantly reduced to a vast array of specks of green light, while the shield continued on toward Blower. Olaf then stomped a foot into the ground, creating violent tremors. The frost on the ground was shattered as a result, and the frosty aura also dissipated. "This is bad." Blower's expression changed drastically as he looked at the oncoming black shield. He materialized a series of magic shields around himself and thrust his wand forward, creating in midair a green longsword that flew toward the round shield. The green longsword was instantly shattered upon making contact with the shield, and it could only slightly alter the angle of the shield's flight. Thus, it hurtled vertically instead of horizontally toward Blower, violently smashing through the magic shields he had just set up. The shield's momentum was hampered significantly as a result, but it still crashed into Blower's chest. Bam! A dull thump erupted, and Blower flew back for 5 or 6 meters before tumbling down at the entrance to Mamie Restaurant. Part of his chest had caved in, and he threw up a mouthful of blood as his face turned deathly pale. Anna's sobs immediately cut off as she turned toward Blower with concern in her eyes. At the same time, Olaf strode toward Sally, making the ground tremor and quake with each and every stomp of his feet. He was like a round ball rolling toward Sally, storming forth with even greater power and momentum than the porcupine battle boar. Sally's expression remained very calm as she swung her wand through the air again. 4 intertwining water dragons hurtled toward Olaf as she simultaneously skipped off to the side. Her bow appeared in her hand again, this time with 5 arrows nocked on the bowstring. All 5 arrows were let loose at once, but each of them was traveling toward Olaf from a different angle. Olaf raised a hand, and the black round shield came flying toward him. He caught the shield as if catching a frisbee, and reduced the 4 water dragons to large splashes of water with a casual swat of the shield. 3 of the 5 arrows were also swatted aside, while the remaining 2 were easily slapped away using his bare hand, thereby keeping him completely unscathed. The round and maladroit-looking Olaf was even faster than Sally, and caught her in the blink of an eye. He didn't unleash any fancy attack or spell, all he did was slam his massive body into Sally's with devastating force. Sally was instantly sent flying as if she had just been run over by a speeding train, and she, too, fell near the restaurant's entrance. Cracks appeared in the ground beneath her as she fell, and she also threw up a mouthful of blood, unable to get up again for the time being. "I'm actually a businessman, so I respect the choices of my clients. I must express forlorn regret toward your choices, but I'll still grant you your wishes." Olaf put away the round shield in his hand, and strode slowly toward the restaurant's entrance as he cackled in a sinister manner. All of the customers looked away in horror upon seeing that. The terrifying might displayed by Olaf was far beyond what they could contend with. Their hearts sided with Blower and Sally, but none of them could do anything in the face of such a fearsome enemy. "If you kill us, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Blower chuckled coldly without as much as a hint of fear in his eyes. "Oh, really now? I've never regretted killing anyone, let alone a piggy." Olaf's laughter became even more boisterous as if he were preparing to do something very exciting. Sally glowered at Olaf with killing intent burning in her eyes. She had never wanted to kill anyone so badly in her life, but she was most likely the one that would die by his hands instead. She wondered just how many wandering elves on the Norland continent had fallen to this heinous demon. "Don't touch Big Sister Aisha." Right at that moment, a mellow yet enraged voice sounded. Everyone immediately turned toward the restaurant's entrance in unison. Amy stepped forward and appraised Olaf with a solemn expression. She raised her wand high above her head, and exclaimed, "Wah! Queen Amy's wand, transform!" Purple light flashed within the purple crystal on the wand, following which a purple staff that was 2 meters in length appeared in her hands. There was a purple crystal ball around the size of a fist on the tip of the wand. Purple and golden light flashed within the crystal ball, creating an extremely dazzling display. "A wand can turn into a staff? Where can I buy a wand like that? It's so cool. She sure is lucky to have 2 great magic casters as her masters. Just her wand alone is something that's unique among magic casters. Will Amy become stronger once her wand transforms into a staff?" All of the customers' eyes lit up at the sight of the staff in Amy's hands. At the same time, they were getting quite curious about her power. Mag was also looking forward to seeing how much Amy would be able to make use of the Oracle Stone's enhancement ability this time. Furthermore, he could already see that Urian was sitting in the lounge chair at the magic potion shop's entrance, so he knew that everything was under control. "A little half-elf brat? She's really cute. She should be able to fetch a good price in the Demon Island's black market. There are some people who would pay a hefty amount for her." Olaf's eyes instantly lit up as he looked at Amy. He had killed someone in Chaos City today, so he would have to flee the area for a while. If he could take this little brat with him, it would net him quite a bit of profit. As for the wand in her hand, that was just a kid's toy, so he didn't have to worry about anything. "Boss, that little brat is at least a 4th-tier magic caster, you should be a bit more careful." Ebenezer had experienced Amy's power firsthand, and knew that she was far more powerful than she looked. A 4th-tier magic caster. A hint of surprise appeared on Olaf's face. So this little brat was a prodigy? That made her an even more prized target. He could develop her into a powerful subordinate or use her as a hostage for negotiations with the Wind Forest. In any case, she would be a valuable asset. "Go, ultimate ice fire bomb!" Amy looked at Olaf with a solemn expression as she pointed her staff at him. Red and white light appeared simultaneously in the Oracle Stone, and a ball of fire and ice hurtled toward Olaf. All of the customers looked on with wide eyes. Sally and Blower also wore expectant expressions. Splutter Olaf raised his shield and swatted the ice fire bomb into oblivion as if he had just snuffed out the flame of a candle, resulting in a very anticlimactic finish. Everyone instantly fell silent upon seeing that. Even though it was unrealistic to expect Amy to defeat such a powerful abyss demon, they were still quite disappointed by the results of this clash. Ha ha ha, little brat, are you still being breastfed? Is you master a sissy? A pitiful little spell like that isn't going to bring me down. Olaf chortled heartily as he looked at Amy. Olaf was roaring with laughter, and so was Ebenezer. All of the customers looked at Olaf with peculiar expressions on their faces. Some of the customers who were more familiar with Amy turned to look at the old man sitting outside the magic potion shop. These demons really were digging a grave for themselves. Is it really that funny? A coarse voice that seemed to have originated from the depths of an infernal hell sounded nearby. A bone-chilling aura that was even colder than the wind blowing from the glaciers of the Anglo-Alps proliferated through the air. Of course. Don't you find it hilarious, old man? Ebenezer was on the brink of tears from laughter as he turned to the hunched Urian. Master Urian is here. All of the customers' eyes lit up, and they all heaved a collective sigh of relief. Seeing as he was here, Blower and Sally were saved. At the same time, they turned to Olaf and Ebenezer with a hint of sympathy in their eyes. Insulting Amy's master in the face of Urian was the very definition of a bad idea. Blower raised his head to look at Urian. He had always known the identity of the old man who always stood at the front of the savory faction line, but he was still struck by a sense of awe and veneration when seeing such a legendary magic caster reveal his power. At the same time, he, too, heaved a sigh of relief. Sally looked at Amy, and her heart was filled with warmth. Amy was the first person to step up in her time of peril, and Urian had only appeared because of her. Olaf's smile instantly stiffened. He could sense the plummeting air temperature and powerful magic aura swirling toward him, and he turned to face Urian with wide, fearful eyes. He then bowed his head in a respectful manner, and said, "I didn't expect to see you here, Master Urian. These people have killed brothers of mine, and I'm only here to avenge them. If my actions have disturbed you in any way, I can only ask for your forgiveness." Urian. Ebenezer's eyes immediately widened with shock and horror. A series of terrifying legends began to surface in his mind. Regardless of whether it was the genocide of the ogre race or the legendary demons that had died by Urian's hands, all of them served as a reminder of his terrifying power. "I don't think it's funny at all." Urian shook his head. A burst of icy blue energy shot forth like lightning from beneath his feet, making its way toward Ebenezer before instantly falling upon him. Ebenezer's massive body was immediately frozen solid, with an expression of shock and horror still lingering on his face. He then crumbled into blocks of ice before shattering into countless tiny frosty shards. Olaf's expression changed drastically at the sight of the pile of icy shards that Ebenezer had been reduced to. His eyes were filled with shock and horror as he recalled the news that he had received from the demon race, which stated that Urian was in Chaos City and it was best to avoid him at all costs. Who would have thought that he would be unlucky enough to encounter him? Despite those harrowing thoughts running through his mind, Olaf still forced himself to calm down as he said, "That bastard deserved to die for showing disrespect to you, Master Urian. Please forgive us, little Amy, are you all right?" Urian completely ignored Olaf, and made his way toward Amy with a gentle expression. "I'm fine, Master Urian." Amy was initially a little disappointed that her spell had been completely ineffective against the enemy, but her eyes lit up again at the sight of Urian freezing Ebenezer solid. She pointed Olaf with elation, and said, "But he said you and Master Krasu are sissies. He said my weak spells can't hurt him, is that true?" Master. And Krasu as well." Olaf stared at Amy with incredulity in his eyes. He suddenly recalled a letter that he had received from his brethren, warning him against messing with the disciple of Urian and Krasu. A restaurant had also been mentioned in the letter, but he had brushed off that detail, regarding it as trivial. However, thinking back to it now, it appeared that the restaurant mentioned was none other than this Mamie restaurant. A chill ran down Olaf's spine as he thought back to what he had said. He could already envision himself suffering the same fate as Ebenezer. It would clearly be impossible to escape from Urian. As for resisting, that would be the best way to die even more quickly. I think sissy is a good term to describe Krasu. Urian chuckled, but as he turned to Olaf, his smile grew colder, and he said, however, the magic you learned is not weak. It should have no problems taking care of a fat little pig like him. Now then, try the Ice Soul Lotus spell that I taught you today on him. Urian raised his hand in Olaf's direction, upon which the black shield in his grasp suddenly crashed to the ground as if it were an infinitely heavy object. It was then entirely covered in ice and frost. Master Urian, I bear no ill will toward you or your disciple. This is all a misunderstanding. Us abyss demons have always revered you. Chief Warzy is my uncle, please do him a favor and spare my pitiful life. Olaf didn't attempt to pick up his fallen shield. Instead, he was pleading for his life with a desperate expression full of horror. He was filled with remorse over the fact that he had plunged himself into such a perilous situation just for an elderly piggy. If I were you, I'd be contemplating how to survive the weak attack that's going to be directed at you next. Urian appraised Olaf with a cold expression. All right. Amy nodded with a serious expression as she turned to Olaf. She pointed her staff toward the demon, and began to chant a spell that she was not very familiar with yet. Dazzling silver light began to converge toward the purple and golden ball on the tip of her staff. Purple and golden light also began to wreak havoc within the oracle stone, creating a brilliant spectacle. Olaf was still looking at Urian with a wary expression, and didn't pay much attention to Amy. A spell unleashed by a fourth-tier magic caster was something that he could defend himself from with ease even with his bare hands. After all, Urian had only prevented him from using his black shield, but had not sealed away any of his power. The surrounding bystanders were of the same opinion. The fact that 4-year-old Amy was capable of unleashing an intermediate spell was already enough to shock the entire Norland continent. However, it was clearly still quite unrealistic to expect her to bring down an 8th-tier Olaf. Ice Soul Lotus, sweep away all impurities, go! Amy chanted as she waved the staff in her hand toward Olaf. A glittering and translucent ice lotus flower then emerged from within the dazzling silver light. It suddenly disappeared before reappearing right in front of Olaf. The Ice Soul Lotus was like the most intricate artistic masterpiece. The transparent ice crystals reflected the dazzling silver light, and instantly appeared above Olaf before silently blossoming. As the Ice Soul Lotus blossomed, countless wisps of ice were suddenly projected downward from above in an area with a diameter of around 2 meters. Olaf was forcibly encapsulated within that area, and the Ice Soul Lotus exploded at the same time. The lotus flower petals transformed into sharp blades which converged toward Olaf. Each and every petal shimmered with an icy cold light, and there were several dozens of those petals. How could this be? Olaf's attention was immediately wrenched away from Urian. As a melee tank, he didn't carry any magic barriers or anything of that nature. However, as the countless wisps of ice fell, he could already sense that his mobility had been restricted, and the lotus petal blades presented an even more potent threat than Blower and Sally had. This spell had already exceeded the boundaries of a 7th-tier spell, it was at least infinitely approaching a spell unleashed by an 8th-tier magic caster. If he had had his black shield, he would have been absolutely confident in his ability to ward off all of the blades of ice. After all, defense was his forte. However, his shield had been sealed in ice by Urian, and his mobility had been restricted. In the face of the countless oncoming blades of ice, he could only evade in a small area and use his bare hands to defend himself. What powerful magic waves! The Oracle Stone must have enhanced the power of her spell by an extreme degree. Blower also looked on in complete disbelief. He had thought that Amy's limit was a 4th-tier spell, but he could clearly sense that her Ice Soul Lotus could pose an absolute threat even to him, thereby making the true upper limit of her power a mystery. The Oracle Stone is only triggered randomly, but that works to intimidate the enemy as it presents a potential underlying hazard. However, this is not Amy's true power. Mag had to remind himself of this in order not to get swept up in unrealistic expectations. The ferociously spinning blades of ice flew toward Olaf from all directions. Olaf's body was quite fat and burly, but his movements were extremely agile. He lashed out with his two large hands, shattering all of the blades of ice that came into contact with his palms. However, there were simply too many blades for him to deal with, and no matter how fast he was, he couldn't take care of all of them. One of the blades sliced across his back, piercing through his thick leather armor and sending a pillar of blood gushing into the air. Almost at the exact same moment, one blade after another pierced through Olaf's armor, leaving a series of wounds on his body. There were also some blades of ice that exploded within his body, leaving behind ghastly wounds, and instantly reducing it to a mass of blood and mangled flesh. Thud! The blades of ice disappeared, and a thick layer of ice appeared on the ground. Olaf's entire body was stained with blood as he fell to his knees. His entire body had been severely ravaged, and he supported himself with his hands as he stared at Amy. He was still in disbelief that such a little girl could be capable of unleashing such a terrifying spell. Amy won. The customers were all completely stunned by what they were seeing. The demon who had defeated Blower and Sally with ease was now kneeling in front of Amy, and Amy had reduced him to this state through her own power, not by relying on Urian. Everyone felt as if this world had gone insane. That's so powerful. Even Amy was stunned by the power of her own spell. She faltered momentarily before putting on a serious expression as she said, "You big baddie, do you see how strong I am now? I, Amy, am super fierce." Following a brief stunned silence, everyone burst into raucous laughter. No one had anticipated this result, and they felt as if they had just witnessed a miracle. "Grandpa," Anna fell onto Joshua's chest again, and sobbed with heartbreak and despair. "We're from the Grey Temple. Everyone, make way." Right at that moment, a loud voice erupted as Barzil arrived on the scene with several Grey Temple investigators. The surrounding bystanders separated to create a path for them. Due to the fact that the incident had taken place right when a transition was taking place in the patrol shift, the Grey Temple personnel were quite late to the scene, and the battle had already concluded. Barzil looked with a grave expression at the blood-stained Olaf kneeling on the ground, and then turned his attention to the wounded Blower and Sally, as well as the dead bodies of the demons and orcs strewn on the ground nearby. Such brutal homicide taking place in the Aiden Square was enough to be treated as a fourth-tier incident. He looked at the shards of ice on the ground, then at Urian and Amy, and he knew that the two of them were clearly somehow related to this incident. That gave him quite a headache. Things always became really complicated when those two were involved. "Mr. Barzil, this is what happened." Mag made his way over to Barzil, and gave an account of the recent events. Sally had killed most of the orcs and demons present, so he had to clarify that they deserved to die. Otherwise, Sally would most definitely be condemned and charged for murder. Only through doing that could he minimize the impact of the incident, as well as ensure that as little attention was drawn to her as possible. Hunting parties for elves. Barzil looked at Anna, who was still sobbing over Joshua's body, and then at Blower and Sally before nodding as he said, "This is an extremely serious incident, so those two elves will need to come with me for an interrogation along with that demon. I have no objection to coming with you, but I hope you can send troops to search for their base located 5 kilometers north of Chaos City as quickly as possible. There are still many of our elven brethren held captive there, and now that these guys have died, they're very likely going to make an escape. In that case, it would be a disaster for our brethren regardless of whether they're killed or transported elsewhere. I do not want to see such a tragedy repeat itself." Blower struggled to his feet and turned a sympathetic gaze toward Anna. Barzil looked at the heartbroken Anna, and hesitated momentarily before nodding as he said, "I'll be sure to report this to my superiors. The Grey Temple is responsible for maintaining safety and order within and around Chaos City, and we stand firm against all unlawful activity in that area." Blower nodded before making his way over to Anna. He squatted down in front of her, and looked into her eyes as he said, "Anna, my name is Blower, and I'll be taking care of you from this day forth. Is that okay? No, I want my grandpa, I only want my grandpa. Anna shook her head as she pressed her face tightly against Joshua's chest. She had already cried herself hoarse. Blower stood up and turned to Mag as he said, "Mr. Mag, please give me a blueberry ice cream. Also, I'll have to trouble you to look after Anna tonight. I have to go and kill all of those bastards." The porcupine battle boar that Lulu had been engaged in a fierce battle with was reduced to shards of ice by a single glance from Urian. The severely wounded Olaf was detained along with Blower, Sally, Lulu, and Zixie. As for Urian and Amy, they were unanimously championed as heroes by all of the onlookers, so they were not taken into custody. The personnel from the Grey Temple quickly cleaned up the scene and carried away all of the dead bodies. All of the onlookers also dispersed, leaving two investigators standing next to Joshua and Anna with complex expressions. They were at a loss for what to do with the dead elf and his grieving granddaughter. After such a tragic event, Mag closed down the restaurant for the night. "Father, big sister Aisha will be fine, right?" Amy turned to Mag with a concerned expression. Yabimiya was also appraising Mag with a worrisome look. "Don't worry, she did a good deed, so she'll definitely be fine. She's just going to the Grey Temple to clarify the situation." Mag nodded in response. He could tell that Blower was no ordinary elf, and they weren't at fault anyway, so he didn't have to worry about them. His main priority was little Anna. Blower had asked him to look after her in his stead during his absence. Amy's gaze fell on Anna before she turned to look up at Mag. "I feel so sorry for that big sister. We should go help her." Mag walked into the restaurant, and quickly returned with a blueberry ice cream in his hands. He led Amy over to Anna before squatting down in front of her. "Don't cry, big sister. I'm Amy, and this is my father. Your grandfather has become a star, he's gone to a better place. Can you let us look after you?" Amy wore a genuine expression on her little face as she consoled Anna in a mellow voice. Anna slowly raised her head upon hearing that. She looked at Amy and Mag with her red and swollen eyes, and tears continued to flow down her cheeks. "Don't cry, big sister. Your grandfather has become a star. Father says my mother lives on the moon. They're both in the sky, so they won't be lonely up there." Amy stepped forward and gently wiped the tears from Anna's eyes. "Really?" Anna looked at Amy with a hesitant expression. "Of course. Father would never lie to me." Amy nodded firmly. She then pointed up to the moon, and said, "Look, there's a new star next to the moon, I didn't see it last night. It must be your grandfather. He didn't leave you, he's still looking at you from up in the sky." "Grandpa," Anna looked at the bright star that Amy was pointing to, and her eyes gradually lit up. "That's right. Your grandfather told you that he was going to become a star. He wouldn't lie to you. These two are going to take him away now and bury him so his soul can completely transform into a star. That way, he'll be able to stay with you forever in the night sky." Mag also offered consolation in a gentle voice. Even though he was lying, if a lie like this could give a child like her a happier childhood, then he was willing to tell a lie. "Really?" Anna looked at Mag, and then down at Joshua. She seemed to be quite hesitant and conflicted. "Yes. Father wouldn't lie." Amy nodded firmly. "Maybe you can bid a final farewell to your grandfather. Remember what he told you, become a free and kind-hearted elf," Mag encouraged. Anna was silent for a moment before rising to her feet and bowing to Joshua in farewell. "Goodbye, Grandpa. I'll talk to you every night from now on." Mag stood up and turned to the two Grey Temple investigators as he said, "Take him away and find a good burial site for him, please. Please notify me of the burial location after the event, I'll issue the required fees." "All right." The two of them nodded gratefully before carrying Joshua onto a horse-drawn carriage, which soon departed. Anna looked on all the way until the carriage had disappeared into the distance. Tears began to shimmer in her eyes as if she were going to cry again. "This is the blueberry ice cream that you like. Your grandfather must have wanted to take you here again for another ice cream, right?" Mag handed over the blueberry ice cream with a smile. Anna looked at the ice cream with a hesitant expression, and didn't accept it. "The ice cream is super delicious, I really like it too. You should take it, big sister." Amy offered encouragement, and as she did so, she couldn't help but lick her lips at the sight of the ice cream in Mag's hand. Anna grappled with an internal conflict for a moment before carefully accepting the ice cream that was being offered to her. A cool and refreshing sensation wafted toward her, and tears began to flow down her face again as she took her first lick. "It's a little cold outside, so let's go sit in the restaurant. Amy can sleep with you tonight." Mag was feeling quite sympathetic toward Anna. Both her parents had passed away, and her grandpa was also gone. She had no relatives left in this world. Anna nodded gently, and Amy held onto her hand before leading her into the restaurant. "Boss really is a good person," Yabimiya thought to herself. After entering the restaurant, Mag went into the kitchen, and cooked Amy and Anna a Yangzhou fried rice each. After eating an ice cream and a Yangzhou fried rice, Anna's mood improved significantly. There was still no smile on her face, but she wasn't crying anymore, and she was reciprocating Amy's attempts to make conversation with her. After finishing the fried rice, Mag took the two little girls upstairs to tuck them into bed. "Ugly duckling, you'll have to sleep on the floor tonight. Big sister Anna will take your place today." Amy appraised Ugly Duckling with a serious expression as it tried to clamber up onto her bed. "Meow." Ugly Duckling looked up at Amy with a pitiable expression. It rolled onto its back, then sidled up to Amy's leg, and rubbed its little head against her foot. Anna's eyes lit up at the sight of Ugly Duckling. She had found the orange kitten adorable when she was eating her fried rice, and she was struck by the urge to hold it. "Wheedling won't do any good." Amy remained resolute in her stance. "Meow." Ugly Duckling was immediately deflated, and it turned to Anna with a beseeching look. Can we let it sleep on the bed as well? It looks so miserable." Anna mustered up the courage to speak up after a brief hesitation. "All right, then. Seeing as big sister Anna is speaking up for you, I'll let you sleep on the bed." Amy nodded slightly reluctantly as she looked at Ugly Duckling. "Meow." Ugly Duckling immediately gave an elated cry, and a smile also appeared on Anna's face. "All right, all three of you should go to bed now." Mag tucked the three of them in with a smile on his face. Ugly Duckling was nestled between the two little girls, and as he looked at the three little heads poking out from under the blanket, Mag was suddenly struck by the feeling that he had two daughters. "Can I ask you to save the elves held captive in the underground cellar?" Anna turned to Mag with a beseeching look in her bright eyes. Mag was just preparing to tell the two little girls a bedtime story, and he was taken aback by her request. "All of them have been locked in cages in the dark and dank underground cellar. They don't have any food or water, and Grandpa said that they'll die if they're not rescued." Anna looked at Mag with a sympathetic expression, and tears were shimmering in her eyes again. "That's so sad, please save them, Father." Amy was also pleading with her bright eyes opened wide. Mag felt as if his heart were melting at the sight of the adorable wheedling elven duo. A rush of blood flowed into his head as a result. Those elf traffickers should die horrible deaths for their heinous crimes. There were still many elves being tormented in the dark underground cellar, and he didn't know how long it would take for the Grey Temple to deploy personnel to search for that base. If those traffickers caught wind of their leader's death, and fled the base with all of their elven prisoners, then that would be a tragedy. The memory of Joshua's death was still fresh in his mind. Even an elderly elf like him had the courage to rescue his brethren even if it meant risking his life in the process. After coming into this world, Mag was burdened by the pressure arising from the existence of enemies that Mag Alex had made. In the face of such fearsome foes, Mag could only hide his heroic side and prioritize his and Amy's safety above all else. As a result, he had forgotten what it felt like to be a hot-blooded justice warrior. He had unintentionally become more selfish, and refrained from engaging in activities that would endanger himself and Amy. As he looked into Amy's and Anna's clear and pure eyes, a hint of shame welled up in his heart. He had been avoiding this topic with Anna as he didn't want her to be sad. However, there was also another subconscious underlying reason, and that was that he didn't want to know too much about this matter, as he would feel guilty for not doing anything if he were to glean more details. He seemed to have already forgotten what kind of person he was. He wasn't Shen Mag, as Shen Mag was always straightforward with his words and actions, and occasionally had a hot-blooded side to himself as well. He had a sharp tongue, but most of the time, his words rang true and cut straight to the point. Those restaurants closed down not because of his sharp tongue, but instead due to the fact that they really had problems. He wasn't Mag Alex, either, as Alex always let his sword do the talking. If he encountered anything he didn't like, he would let his sword sort it out. Those who had fallen by his blade included evil knights, man-eating demons, and evil dragons that attacked villages. If he heard about any injustice in this world, he would immediately arrive on the scene. All of the evildoers that others couldn't kill were slain by himself or his purple-striped griffin. But now, he had placed himself under a crippling set of shackles. He had lost his pure heart and hot-blooded attitude. In the process, he had also lost the qualities of courage and sacrifice that were imperative for a knight, thus becoming the kind of person that he'd once detested. This is not the type of father that Amy likes, is it? If I always think about running away in the face of problems, how am I going to become a good father and support a family? A series of questions flashed through Mag's mind, and he was suddenly enlightened. His eyes lit up as he thought to himself, perhaps it's time I made some changes. Mag turned to Anna after making up his mind, and asked, Anna, do you know where that place is? If I asked you to take us there, would you be able to find it? Yes, I remember where it is. Grandpa told me that we can get there by going north from Chaos City, then we go along a river. Anna immediately sat up and began to give a serious reply. All right, then let's go and save them. Anna was clearly fit to be their navigator, so finding the base wouldn't be an issue. Really? Anna's eyes immediately lit up with excitement as she looked at Mag. I knew Father would agree. Father is a true hero. Amy also sat up and looked at Mag with elation. Meanwhile, Ugly Duckling looked around with a confused expression. It had fallen asleep as soon as it had been tucked in, so it had no idea what was going on. You two stay upstairs for now, I'll go make some preparations. Mag was quite elated at the sight of Amy's joyful smile and sparkling eyes. He turned to go downstairs as he murmured to himself, there are some leftover dough and braised meat from the dinner service tonight. Half an hour later, Mag emerged from the restaurant with his bicycle. Amy had changed into her magician robes, and was helped into the basket at the front of the bicycle by Mag. Anna had also been fitted into a set of blue magician robes, and she was seated on the back seat of the bicycle with a curious face and a large lunchbox in her hands. Let's go! Amy yelled with elation as she raised her hands high into the air. Mag smiled as the bicycle began to gather speed. Anna was initially quite curious, and had her eyes wide open until she looked down at the bicycle tire below her. She was petrified by the sight of such a fast-moving vehicle being supported by just two wheels, and closed her eyes tightly as she latched onto Mag's clothes. In contrast, Amy was riding the bicycle in the basket for the first time, and was giggling with joy. Don't be scared. This is a bicycle, it won't fall over. Mag could feel the clothes tightening abruptly around his midsection, so he offered gentle words of comfort. Anna was somewhat soothed by Mag's words, and she found the ride to be quite stable. She could feel the refreshing autumn breeze blowing on her face and hear Amy's joyful laughter. After a brief hesitation, she slowly opened her eyes to find the nearby trees quickly being left behind. It was an experience similar to riding a horse, but it was a lot more stable. This was quite a strange feeling, and she still insisted on clutching onto Mag's clothes tightly. The bicycle passed through the chaos city streets, leaving behind dumbstruck by passers, of which there weren't very many, as it was already late in the night. Mag parked the bicycle in a courtyard located in the northern part of the city before helping Amy and Anna down onto the ground. "Father, aren't we going to save the elves? Why did we come here?" Amy was quite perplexed. Anna was also looking at Mag with a puzzled expression, but she didn't say anything. "We need some helpers." Mag brandished the lunchbox in his hand before striding over to the door. He knocked on the door, and yelled, "Sargeras, I've got some business for you."